Hazel stood up, walked in a small circle, sat back down. Okay, so, what does Bastian do in your book? He tries to drive a wedge between Kale and Aaron. He spreads carefully chosen lies, makes it seem like Aaron has divided loyalties. He nearly succeeds. And now Kale's attention is on you instead. So Bastian might target me, Jinhyo said. Yes, I'm the new variable he doesn't understand. And what Bastian doesn't understand, he removes. Hazel looked at him steadily. Then we need to be careful. We, Jinhyo repeated. You said we. Hazel crossed his arms. I'm your friend. Also, this is objectively the most interesting thing that has ever happened to me, and I refuse to be excluded. Jinhyo felt something warm settle in his chest. Uncomplicated warmth. The kind that came from a person who simply showed up and stayed. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't get emotional. I'm being selfish. Hazel waved a hand. Now, does Bastian win in the book? No. Duke Aaron figures it out eventually and exposes him. So Aaron is smart. Very. Hazel tapped his chin. Then maybe Aaron is an ally. Jinhyo hadn't thought about it that way. He had been so busy thinking of Aaron as the person Kale was supposed to be with. The right ending, the original story, that he hadn't considered Aaron as simply a person. A smart, warm, perceptive person who had voluntarily sat across from a nervous stranger at a formal dinner and laughed genuinely at the rose comment. Maybe, Jinhyo said. The next morning, Jinhyo found Bastian's first move. It was a note delivered to the wrong table at breakfast, clearly meant to be seen, suggesting that Kim Si-woo's presence near the Crown Prince was connected to his family seeking political advantage, and that his interest in Kale was strategic rather than genuine. Someone showed the note to Kale, as intended. Jinhyo found out from Hazel an hour later. He went immediately to find Kale, not because he had a plan, but because he was tired of letting things happen around him. He was not Kim Si-woo, passive background character. He was Lee Jinhyo, and he had read this story, and he was not going to let Bastian run it. He found Kale in the small study off the west wing. Kale was standing at the window and did not turn when Jinhyo came in. Someone says you have reasons for being near me, Kale said. Someone is trying to cause problems, Jinhyo said. Yes. Kale turned then. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were doing something complicated. Are they wrong? Jinhyo looked at him directly. My family has no plan involving you. I have no political reason for being here. The reason I kept coming back to the garden was because... He stopped, started again. Because I wanted to. Silence. Because I wanted to, Jinhyo repeated, more quietly. That's all. Kale looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, some of the tension in his shoulders changed. Someone is trying to separate us, Kale said. The word hit to Jinhyo like a quiet knock to the chest. Yes, Jinhyo said, and I think I know who. Everything felt like it was moving too fast. Jinhyo had spent a week trying to stay in the background. Now he was standing in the Crown Prince's private study, having just implied he knew who the secondary villain was, while also actively trying not to think about how Kale had said, "Ah," in a voice that sounded like it meant something. Tell me, Kale said. Lord Bastian, Jinhyo said. He's been watching you, watching anyone near you. The note this morning was from him, or arranged by him. He works through careful suggestions and small lies, never anything provable. Kale's eyes narrowed. How do you know this? This was the part Jinhyo had known would come. He had prepared 3 different answers. They all sounded ridiculous under the actual weight of the question. I pay close attention, Jinhyo said finally. I read people. Kale stepped closer, not threatening, just the way he moved when he was thinking, like he needed physical proximity to understand something. You said that before, that you read a lot, maps, floor plans, architecture. Yes, and people? Sometimes. Kale looked at him with those silver eyes, and Jinhyo had the deeply uncomfortable feeling that Kale was reading. Right back. What do you see when you read me? Kale asked. Oh no. Jinho's mouth decided to take over from his brain, which was apparently not paying attention. Someone very lonely who got so used to it that he started calling it preference, he said. Someone who notices everything and shows nothing. Someone who is, despite all of that, genuinely kind when he thinks no one is looking. The room was very quiet. Kale said nothing for so long that Jinho started composing his own eulogy inside his head. "That's the most anyone has ever said to me," Kale said finally, low and careful, like he was handling something fragile. "I'm sorry," Jinho said automatically. "I shouldn't have. Don't apologize." Kale's voice was firmer. "I don't want you to apologize for saying something real." Jinho's heart was doing something very unregulated. Duke Eren chose that precise moment to appear in the doorway. He looked between them, at Kale, at Jinho, at the extremely charged air between them, with the expression of someone who had just walked into a room and understood immediately everything that had been happening before they arrived. "I came to talk about Bastion," Eren said, "but I think I may have missed something." "Bastion first," Kale said, moving back slightly. Eren came in and sat down and told them what he had found, that Bastion had been meeting quietly with 2 members of a rival faction, that the note was just the first step, that there were larger plans in motion. In the novel, Eren had discovered all of this alone and brought it to Kale as proof of his loyalty. Here he was, bringing it to both of them, looking between them equally. When they had finished planning their response to Bastion, a careful, documented process that would expose him without making Kale look reactive, Eren stood to leave and then stopped at the door. "Siwoo," he said. Jinho looked up. Eren smiled at him, and it was warm and clear and entirely without rivalry. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. He left. Jinho stared at the empty doorway. "He means it," Kale said quietly from beside him. "Eren doesn't say things he doesn't mean." "I know," Jinho said. He did know. He had read it across 400 pages. Eren was genuinely good. And maybe, Jinho was slowly coming to understand, the story he had loved was not wrong. It was just not the only version of love in it. Later, walking back to his room in the blue evening light, Jinho thought about Chapter 12. The scene he had imagined was the beginning of everything. Eren arriving, Kale turning toward him, the long, slow love story starting its first page. But that scene had passed. Eren had arrived, and Kale had not turned the way the novel said he would. He had turned a different direction, toward a side character no one was supposed to notice, standing in the East Garden, talking to roses. Maybe, Jinho thought with something careful and fragile opening in his chest, some stories just write themselves differently in the living. Bastion moved on a Sunday evening, during a formal reception. He was precise about it. A word here, an implication there. A slowly spreading suggestion that Kim Si-woo's family had been feeding information about the palace's internal politics to an outside party. By the time Jinho heard about it, half the room had already heard some version of the story, and the other half was watching to see what happened. Jinho stood very still and took a slow breath. Hassel appeared beside him with the calm face of someone who had been waiting for this. "Now," he said quietly. "Now," Jinho agreed. They had prepared for this. Not perfectly. They were 2 minor nobles, not experienced political operators, but they had spent several evenings with Kale, and then separately with Eren, mapping out exactly how Bastion worked, what he needed to be exposed, and where his evidence trail was thin enough to pull on. The pull was Lord Bastion's financial records, and specifically 3 payments to a document forger whose name had come up in a completely unrelated merchant dispute earlier that year. Eren had found the thread. Jinho had known to look for it because he knew Bastion's methods from the novel. Together, they had built something real from it. Eren moved first, and he moved beautifully, crossing the reception room with his easy, confident walk, speaking to 3 different senior nobles in a row, dropping the thread of the forger's name into each conversation so quietly it sounded like nothing. Just a piece of public record, just something he happened to know. By the time Bastion realized what was happening, the shape of it was already in the room. Kale did not say anything dramatic. He simply walked to where Bastion was standing, looked at him with those flat silver eyes, and said 4 quiet words. "We need to talk privately." And the tone of it, the complete absence of warmth, said everything that needed to be said. Jinho watched from the side and felt something between relief and exhaustion loosen in his shoulders. Hazel handed him a small cup of something warm. "You look like you've been holding your breath for a week." "I have been," Jinho said. "You can breathe now." In a minute, Bastion was removed quietly from the reception. No drama, no public scene. Kale was too careful for that. The official process would follow through proper channels, with Aaron's documentation and the forger's record as foundation. It would be tidy, legal, and undeniable, Jinhyo finally breathed. Later that night, when the reception had emptied and the corridors were quiet, Kale found Jinhyo sitting on the steps of the East Garden entrance, looking at the stars that were visible from the gap in the roofline. Jinhyo heard his footsteps and did not turn around. Kale sat down beside him, not across, not at a formal distance, beside, close enough that their arms were almost touching. They sat in silence for a while, which should have been uncomfortable and was not. "You knew what Bastian would do," Kale said. Not an accusation, just a statement, offered carefully. "I had a feeling," Jinhyo said. "And you planned ahead." "Aaron did most of the work. I just knew where to look." Another silence. Then Kale said, quietly, "How long have you been carrying all of this alone?" Jinho turned to look at him. In the dark, Kale's profile was softer, the sharpness of him gentled by shadow and tiredness. He looked less like a prince and more like a person. "Since I got here," Jinho said honestly. "That's a very long time. It's been a few weeks." Still, Kale looked at him sideways. "You should have told me sooner." "You're the crown prince," Jinho said. "And I'm, if you say, just a minor noble." Kale interrupted. "I will be genuinely upset." Jinho blinked. Kale turned to look at him fully, and his expression was the most open Jinho had ever seen it, like someone had taken the carved ice face and simply set it down somewhere else. "I don't know how to do this," Kale said. "Say what I want to say. It's not something I've had practice in." His jaw moved. "But I don't want to not say it and have you think I feel nothing." Jinho's heart was doing the unregulated thing again. "You don't have to be careful with the words," Jinho said softly. "Just say what's true." Kale looked at him for a long moment. Then, "I think about you constantly. I look for you in rooms before I know I'm doing it. When you're not there, I notice. When you are there, it's the only thing that makes the room feel less like a performance." He paused. "I've never told anyone that. I've never felt it before." Jinho could feel his own heartbeat in his throat. "I'm a side character," he said, a last small protest that even he didn't believe anymore. "You're not," Kale said simply. "Not to me." The stars were still there. The garden was quiet. Somewhere inside, Hazel was probably eating unauthorized snacks from the reception and being cheerful about it. Duke Aaron was probably writing neat notes about Bastian's case in elegant handwriting. The world was still turning the way it was supposed to. Just not the way it was written. Jinho looked at this man beside him, this person who noticed small things and showed nothing and was, when he thought no one was looking, genuinely, simply kind. And he thought about the choice he had made weeks ago, on a floor, alone, when he had first understood what he felt. "Me too," Jinho said. "All of it. Me too." Kale looked at him. Then, slowly, as if he was doing something he had to think about first, he reached out and covered Jinho's hand with his own. Neither of them moved for a long time. It was enough, more than enough. Spring arrived loudly. The palace gardens were full of color, red and yellow and the kind of reckless pink that shows up in early warmth and refuses to apologize for itself. Jinho stood in the East Garden with a cup of tea he had been holding long enough for it to go cold, looking at the roses. "Still giving them feedback?" said a voice behind him. He turned. Kale was walking toward him through the garden path, still dressed in the formal coat from his morning council session, looking slightly exhausted in the way he always looked after 2 hours of political meetings. "Constructive criticism," Jinho said. "They respond well to it. The roses. The roses. Very growth-oriented audience." Kale stopped beside him and looked at the roses with the expression of a person reconsidering everything he thought he knew about horticulture. Then he looked at Jinho, then back at the roses, then at Jinho again. "You are the strangest person I have ever met," he said. "And yet here you are," Jinho said. Kale's mouth moved. The ghost smile, which Jinho had spent months carefully collecting, had graduated into an actual smile over the past several weeks. Still small, still quiet, still something only certain people got to see, but real. Here I am, Kale agreed. It had been 2 months since the Bastion incident. 2 months since the steps of the East Garden and the careful words and the hand covering a hand. 2 months of something that was fragile at first, and then steady, and then simply there, as natural as the garden paths Jinho had known before he ever walked them. Nothing had been announced. Nothing official had changed. They were careful, because they had to be. Because the world was still the world, and politics was still politics, and Kale was still a crown prince, with more responsibilities than any one person should reasonably carry. But in the private spaces, the garden, the small study, the quiet corridor at night, they were simply themselves. It was more than Jinho had ever expected to have. Duke Eren had become something Jinho had not predicted, a genuine friend. The three of them had settled into something easy and warm, a kind of orbit that felt nothing like rivalry, and everything like people who simply understood each other. Eren had never, not once, made Jinho feel like a usurper or an unexpected complication. He had simply made room, warmly, without drama, the way he did everything. The story went differently than I expected, Jinho had told Eren once, quietly, in the library. Eren had smiled at him with those dark, warm eyes. Most good stories do. Hazel, for his part, had declared himself the official historian of the whole situation, and was apparently keeping notes. Jinho had firmly told him to stop. Hazel had cheerfully refused. Generations will want to know about this, Hazel had said. The side character who rewrite the main plot. It's incredible material. Please do not write a book about my personal life. No promises. In the East Garden, Kale sat down on the low stone bench near the roses, still wearing his formal coat, still slightly exhausted, and leaned back and looked at the sky. Jinho sat beside him and drank his cold tea without complaint. Council wants to discuss the northern border agreements this afternoon, Kale said. Then the taxation review. Then the water infrastructure proposal. He closed his eyes briefly. I am extremely tired of being the crown prince today. You're very good at it though, Jinho said. Being tired of it? Being a crown prince? Kale opened his eyes and looked at Jinho sideways. Says the person who gave feedback to roses. I stand by my record. A pause. The garden was warm and unhurried around them. Somewhere above the walls, birds were involved in an argument that seemed personal. In the original story, Jinho said carefully, they talked about it sometimes, in pieces, what he remembered. The North Border agreements took 3 chapters to resolve. And? They resolved it, because Eren suggested a format for the negotiation that neither side felt was a concession. I have the outline in my head if it helps. Kale looked at him. Something quiet and complicated moved through his expression. You carry a lot, he said softly. It's useful sometimes. I don't mean the plot details. Kale turned toward him. I mean all of it. You woke up somewhere completely strange. You didn't belong in this story at all, according to how you tell it. And instead of, he paused, searching for words. Instead of falling apart, you just helped. Every person you could, stayed careful, watched out for threats I didn't even know were coming. Jinho looked at him. Someone had to. It didn't have to be you. It was me anyway. Kale reached over and took the cold cup from Jinho's hands and set it on the bench, and then held Jinho's hand instead, which was objectively a better use of the space. I'm glad it was you, Kale said quietly. I'm glad you talked to the roses. I'm glad you said strange things and looked at the world like you already understood it. I'm glad you're here. Jinho looked at their hands, at the garden around them, at the palace walls and the spring sky above them. He had reincarnated into a romance novel, not as the hero, not as the main villain. As a side character, no one was supposed to remember. He had known the ending. He had known who was supposed to fall in love and how and why. He had planned to stay invisible, stay background, stay out of the story's way, and let it be what it was written to be. And instead, through roses and cold tea and one word, you said quietly in a small study, and a friend who kept notes, and a duke who made room, and a prince who noticed small things. He had ended up somewhere the original story never went. He was not a side character anymore. He did not think he had been one for a long time. I'm glad I'm here too, he said. Kale squeezed his hand once. They sat together in the warm spring garden while the birds continued their argument above and the roses had no notes to give back today. Somewhere in the palace, Hazel was writing this down. Somewhere in a drawing room, Aaron was laughing about something with total and genuine warmth. And Lee Jinho, who had died on a Tuesday eating instant noodles in his underwear and woken up in a book that was not written for him, sat in a garden that smelled like spring and held a hand that was not supposed to be his, and thought, sometimes the story gets better when someone changes it. He smiled. You're smiling at nothing again, Kale said. I'm smiling at the roses. There are no roses in front of you. They know I'm thinking about them. Kale looked at the sky with the expression of a man deeply in love with a person who was completely ridiculous, and said nothing, and did not let go. Lee Jinho died doing what he loved, which was eating instant noodles in his underwear at 2 in the morning and ignoring every responsibility he had. So when he opened his eyes to a ceiling with golden chandeliers and silk curtains that cost more than his entire apartment, his first thought was, this is not my room. His second thought was, oh no. He sat up slowly. His hands were smaller, his hair was longer, and when he stumbled to the mirror in the corner of the enormous bedroom, a face he absolutely recognized stared back at him. Kim Si-woo, 17 years old, third son of a minor noble family, total background character, appeared on exactly 4 pages in the novel. A crown for 2 hearts. Mostly to pour tea and look decorative. Jinho, or Si-woo, apparently, pressed his forehead against the cool mirror glass and let out a long, suffering sigh. Okay, he said to himself. Okay, this is fine. I read this book 3 times. I know everything that happens. I just have to stay away from the main characters, not get involved in the plot, survive until the ending, and go home. Simple. Easy. No problem. He paused. I am so dead. The novel A Crown for 2 Hearts was a beloved romance story about 2 men, Crown Prince Kale, cold and unreachable as winter ice, and Duke Aaron, warm and devastating as a summer storm. Their love story burned slow and beautiful across 420 pages. Jinho had cried at the ending. He had cried twice, actually. Once while reading it, and once while thinking about it on the bus. But he was not in their love story. He was a tea-pouring, background-standing, name-forgettable side character, which meant his only job was to not mess things up. The bedroom door swung open and a maid walked in, bowing quickly. Young Master Si-woo, the Crown Prince's morning gathering begins in 1 hour. Your presence has been requested. Jinho blinked. My what? Your presence. The Crown Prince requested you specifically. Jinho's left eye twitched. In the novel, Kim Si-woo had never been requested by the Crown Prince. Not once. Not even accidentally. The Crown Prince barely acknowledged people who were not Duke Aaron. This was already off script. He dressed carefully, trying to remember everything he knew about court etiquette from 400 pages of novel content. Bow at 30 degrees. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not stare at the Crown Prince. Do not trip over your own feet. Do not accidentally cause an international incident. The palace was stunning in a way that made Jinho's chest ache a little. He had read descriptions of it, the marble corridors, the gardens full of white flowers, the sound of fountains, but reading it and walking through it were 2 completely different things. It was real. Every stone, every scent, every cold draft of morning air. He found the gathering room and slipped inside, taking a place near the back with the other minor attendants. He exhaled. Good. He was invisible. He was background. He was exactly where Kim Si-woo belonged. Then, Crown Prince Kale walked in. Jinho had imagined Kale 100 times while reading. Tall, dark-haired, silver-eyed, with a face like it had been carved by someone who was angry at everyone who was less beautiful. And the real thing was, somehow, worse, better, both. Kale's gaze swept the room with the energy of a man who found everyone mildly disappointing. Then it landed on Jinho, and it stopped. Jinho's entire body went rigid. Do not make eye contact. Do not make eye contact. Do not. You, Kale said. The room went quiet. Every single head turned toward Jinho. He felt like a small, frightened rabbit that had somehow wandered into a room full of very well-dressed wolves. Me? Jinho said, in a voice much smaller than he intended. Kale walked toward him, across the entire room, and stopped 2 feet away. He looked at Jinho for a long, unreadable moment. I saw you in the East Garden yesterday, Kale said. You were talking to the roses. Jinho's face turned red. He had in fact been talking to the roses. He had been reciting the plot of the novel to himself quietly, using the rose bushes as his audience, because he was a deeply normal and well-adjusted person. I was giving them feedback, Jinho said carefully. Kale blinked. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth moved, just barely, a ghost of something that was almost a smile. Come to the afternoon garden session, Kale said. I want to hear more. He walked away. The room stayed quiet for 3 full seconds. Then everyone started whispering. Jinho stood there, staring at the crown prince's retreating back, and thought with great clarity, I am so incredibly dead. Jinho had a plan. It was a good plan. It was a solid, reasonable, completely foolproof plan. Step 1. Attend the garden session. Step 2. Say something boring. Step 3. Be so uninteresting that the crown prince never looked his way again. Step 4. Go back to being invisible. Step 5. Survive the novel. The plan lasted exactly 4 minutes. The afternoon garden was even more beautiful than the morning one. Wide stone pathways between rows of carefully shaped trees, a stone table in the center, and about a dozen minor nobles all pretending to look casual, while clearly dying of nerves. Because Crown Prince Kale was already there, sitting at the table, reading something, Jinho slipped into a seat near the edge, behind 2 taller people, and congratulated himself on his invisibility skills. Siwoo. Jinho's eye twitched again. He stood slowly and walked to the seat directly across from the Crown Prince, because apparently that was his life now. You're hiding again, Kale said, without looking up from his reading. I prefer the term strategically positioned, Jinho said. Kale did look up at that. Those silver eyes landed on Jinho with the full weight of a person who was not used to being talked back to. Jinho's survival instincts screamed at him. His mouth, apparently, had not gotten the message. That's a very long title for hiding behind someone's head, Kale said. Thank you. I've been working on my vocabulary. There was a beat of silence. Then Kale made a sound. A very quiet, very short sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been indigestion. Hard to tell. The garden session was supposed to be a light social gathering, but with the Crown Prince sitting there like a beautiful storm cloud, most people were too nervous to speak freely. Jinho, who had read this novel 3 times and knew Kale's entire personality breakdown, felt strangely calm. He knew Kale was not actually cruel, just closed, like a book locked with no key. The problem was that Jinho knew what the key was. He had read it. The key was Duke Aaron, the soft, laughing, golden-haired Duke who would walk into Kale's life in Chapter 12 and break every wall down, gently, like water finding its way through stone. Which meant Jinho needed to stay very firmly in the background until Chapter 12, when the real love story began, and not, under any circumstances, accidentally take a role that was not his to take. A small voice in the back of his head said, "But Kale looked at you first." Jinho told that voice to shut up. "You knew this garden," Kale said suddenly. Jinho looked up. "Sorry?" "Yesterday, you walked through it without looking for the path. You already knew where the paths were." Kale set down his papers. "You've never been to the palace before your family's recent appointment, so how did you know?" The air between them felt suddenly careful. Jinho's brain ran several calculations very quickly. He could not say, "I read a novel about this place." He could not say, "I memorized the layout from 400 pages of fiction." He could not say, "In my original world, I am a 23-year-old who choked on noodles." "I read a lot," Jinho said. "Maps, architecture, floor plans." Kale stared at him. "You read palace floor plans. For fun. I have very specific hobbies." Another one of those ghost smiles. Jinho was beginning to feel like he was collecting them. The session ended as the sun slid lower. People filtered out slowly. Jinho stood, ready to escape, when a hand closed around his wrist. Light, barely a touch, but completely stopping. He looked down at Kale's hand, then up at Kale's face. "Tomorrow," Kale said. "Same time." It was not a request. Jinho walked back to his room with his heart doing something strange and loud in his chest. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall for a long moment. "This is fine," he told the wall. "This doesn't mean anything. Kale is just curious. Once Duke Aaron arrives, everything goes back to the original story. I am Kim Si-woo, side character. Nobody falls in love with the side character." The wall did not respond. Walls Jinho had discovered were not great at offering emotional support. He fell back onto the bed and stared at the golden ceiling and tried very hard not to think about the fact that when Kale's hand had touched his wrist, it had felt, for just 1 second, like something pulled tight inside him. "I am not catching feelings for the main character," Jinho said firmly to the ceiling. "I am a very sensible person." Outside his window, the palace bells rang for evening. Far away, in a golden carriage rolling toward the capital city, a man with warm eyes and a laughing mouth was getting closer. Duke Aaron was almost here. And Jinho, who knew exactly how the story was supposed to go, pulled his blanket over his head and tried to convince himself that the knot in his stomach was just dinner. It was absolutely not just dinner. Duke Aaron was everything the novel said he was. He arrived on a Tuesday morning in a carriage decorated with his family crest, a golden bird mid-flight, and the entire courtyard turned to look at him the way flowers turn toward sunlight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with honey-gold hair and dark, warm eyes, and a smile that landed on every person he looked at like it was made specifically for them. Jinho stood in the courtyard with the other minor attendants and felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest. In the novel, Jinho had loved Aaron. He was the warmer half of the central love story, the one who reached out first, who laughed loudly, who dragged Kale back to the world every time Kale tried to disappear into cold duty. In person, watching him actually walk across the courtyard and charm everyone within a 5-meter radius, Jinho felt something he had not expected. He felt jealous, which was insane, completely insane. He had no right to feel jealous. He was Kim Si-woo, tea pouring, background standing, nameless Kim Si-woo. Kale and Aaron were supposed to fall in love. That was the whole story. Jinho was just a visitor inside it. "You look like someone stepped on your breakfast," said a voice beside him. Jinho turned. A boy about his age was standing there, narrow-faced with messy dark hair and an extremely unbothered expression. Jinho searched his memory. Right, Park Hae-seo, Kim Si-woo's only real friend in the novel. Appeared on 6 pages, mostly comic relief. "You're not fine. Your face is doing something tragic." "This is my normal face." "No, it's not. I've seen your normal face. Your normal face is blank. This face is actively suffering." Hazel squinted at him. "Is it about the Duke?" "No." "Is it about the Crown Prince?" Jinho opened his mouth, closed it. "No." Hazel looked at him for a long moment with the expression of someone watching a friend walk slowly toward a fire. "Sure," he said. "Totally." The formal welcome dinner that evening was everything the novel described. Long tables, heavy candlelight, music from somewhere unseen, and food that Jinho was too nervous to properly enjoy. He sat near the end of the minor noble's table, doing his absolute best to be invisible. He managed it for about 20 minutes. Then Duke Aaron sat down across from him, not next to the Crown Prince, where he was supposed to be, across from Jinho, at the minor noble's table, with the energy of someone who had simply sat where he felt like sitting and dared anyone to question it. "You're Kim Si-woo, right?" Aaron said, pouring himself some wine like they were old friends. "Kale mentioned you." Jinho's brain stopped processing language for a moment. "He... what?" "Mentioned you," Aaron said cheerfully. "Said you were interesting." "Kale never calls anyone interesting. Last person he called interesting was a very complicated piece of architecture." He smiled, and it was warm and genuine, and somehow made Jinho feel worse. "What did you do?" "I talked to roses," Jinho said flatly. Aaron stared at him. Then he laughed. A real, full laugh that turned a few heads. "That's it? That's all it took?" "Apparently." Aaron leaned forward on his elbow, looking at Jinyo with those warm, dark eyes, and said, "I like you already." Jinyo thought, "Of course you do. You're written to like everyone." Then he felt immediately guilty for thinking it, because Eren had done nothing wrong. He was exactly who he was supposed to be. He was wonderful. He was the right person to fall in love with Kale. Jinho knew that better than anyone. "That's very kind," Jinho said, with what he hoped was a normal smile. Later, when Jinho was walking back to his room, he turned a corner and nearly walked straight into Crown Prince Kale. They both stopped, 2 feet apart. Corridor lit by wall torches. Very dramatic, in Jinho's opinion. "You didn't sit with me at dinner," Kale said. "I'm a minor noble," Jinho said. "I can't sit at the main table. I could have had your seating changed." Jinho looked at him. "Why would you do that?" Kale said nothing for a moment. His jaw moved slightly, like he was choosing words and rejecting them. Finally, "Duke Eren sat with you instead." "He did," Jinho confirmed. "He's very friendly. He's friendly to everyone." "Yes." Another pause. Something crossed Kale's face, fast, there and gone, like a shadow over water. Then his expression went back to its usual carved ice calm. "Good night, Siwu," he said. "Good night, Your Highness." Kale walked away. Jinyo stood in the empty corridor and stared after him and had a terrible, sinking, completely unwanted realization. In the novel, Kale did not talk to side characters in corridors at night. In the novel, Kale did not notice who sat where at dinner. In the novel, Kale did not look at anyone the way he kept looking at Jinho. Something had already changed. The story had already shifted, quietly, just a little, like a river slowly finding a new path. And Jinho, who had memorized the original, could feel exactly how far it had moved. He pressed his back against the corridor wall and looked up at the ceiling. "I'm in trouble," he told the ceiling. The ceiling, like the wall before it, offered no help at all. There is a scene in chapter 14 of A Crown for Two Hearts, where Crown Prince Kale and Duke Eren have their first real private conversation. A night garden, moonlight, Eren saying something quietly honest, and Kale responding for the first time without armor. Jinhyo had read it 7 times across 3 different reads of the novel. He had cried at it twice. He was not supposed to be there when it happened. He absolutely, completely should not have been in the night garden on the evening it took place. But Hazel had sent him a note saying he needed help finding his misplaced court documents, which he had apparently left somewhere near the garden paths, and Jinho, being a good and loyal friend to a character he genuinely liked, had gone to help. He found the documents in the dark, tucked under a stone bench. He also found himself very close to 2 other people who were standing under a flowering tree, speaking in low voices, not aware he was there. He should have left immediately. He did not leave immediately, because his feet stopped working when he heard Kale's voice say something he had never said in the original novel. "I have been thinking about someone." Eren's voice was gentle. "Tell me." "I don't know what to do with it. It's not something I've felt before." A pause. "He says strange things. He looks at the world like he already understands it, and then he looks at me like I'm something he hasn't read yet." Jinho's heart was beating very loudly. "That sounds like you like him," Eren said simply. "I don't know if that's allowed," Kale said quietly. Jinho, pressed behind a stone pillar in the dark, realized 3 things at the same time. First, Kale was talking about him. Second, in the original novel, this scene was the beginning of Kale and Eren's love story. Third, in this version, Eren was not the person Kale was talking about. The story had changed. He had changed it just by existing, just by talking to roses and saying strange things, just by being somewhere slightly different than Kim Si-woo had ever been. He had changed the story. Jinho pressed himself against the pillar and breathed very quietly and tried to think. He had 2 choices. He could step out, say something awkward, be the flustered side character, give Kale a reason to distance himself, push the story back toward its original track. Kale and Eren would still find their way to each other maybe. Stories wanted to happen the way they were written, they had gravity. Or he could do nothing. He slipped away without making a sound, through a side path, out of the garden. He walked back to his room and sat on the floor with his back against the bed, because somehow sitting on the floor felt more real than sitting on silk blankets. He had known, somewhere quiet and ignored, for several days now. The realization wasn't new. He just hadn't said it to himself yet in plain words. He liked Kale. He had memorized a fictional version of this man, and then met the real version, and somehow it was worse than anything he had prepared for. Because the real Kale was awkward in ways the novel never showed. He hesitated before he smiled. He noticed small things: who sat where, who walked differently, who talked to flowers. He asked questions that showed he was actually listening, and he had said, "He looks at me like I'm something he hasn't read yet." And Jinhyo was, very unfortunately, completely done. "I'm an idiot," he told his knees, hugging them to his chest. The door opened. Haesol walked in holding the recovered documents with a very guilty expression. "Did you find them?" Jinhyo asked dully. "Yes." Haesol paused. "Did something happen?" "Nothing. Everything is fine." Haesol sat down on the floor across from him, which was the kind of thing good friends did without being asked. "You have your suffering face on again." "This is my normal face." "It is genuinely not." Haesol looked at him steadily. "Siwoo, what's happening?" Jinho stared at him. Haesol, Park Haesol, 6 pages of comic relief, was looking at him with entirely too much perception for a side character. "Have you ever read a story," Jinho said carefully, "and loved how it ended? And then you ended up inside it, and suddenly the ending you loved starts to feel like the wrong one?" Haesol was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the most dramatic way anyone has ever said, 'I like someone.'" Jinho laughed despite himself, a short, helpless sound. "Yeah," he said finally, "I like someone. And this is a problem because he's not supposed to like me back." Jinho leaned his head against the bed behind him. "He's supposed to be with someone else, someone who's better for him, someone warm and brave and exactly right." Haesol tilted his head. "Better according to who?" Jinho did not have an answer for that. Outside the window, the palace was quiet. Somewhere in the garden, a night bird was singing. Jinho sat on his floor and held very carefully the terrifying possibility that maybe, the story he had read was not the only story that could be true. 3 days after the garden night, everything became significantly more complicated. Jinho was walking through the east corridor when he saw Lord Bastian. In the novel, Lord Bastian was the secondary villain, not the dramatic final boss type, but the quiet, dangerous type who worked in the background. His role was to isolate Kale from Duke Eren during a critical political moment, cause a rift between them, and nearly succeed in separating them permanently. He appeared in chapters 16 through 22 and gave Jinho anxiety every single time, even on rereads. In person, he was even less likable. Tall, polished, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was standing in the corridor talking to one of Kale's personal attendants, and when Jinho passed, that smile turned toward him. "Young Master Siwoo," Bastian said pleasantly. "You've been spending quite a bit of time near the Crown Prince lately." Jinho smiled carefully. "Just fulfilling my family's court duties." "Of course," Bastian said. "It's just interesting. Kale has never taken interest in minor nobles before. One wonders what changed." The smile was still pleasant. The words were not. Jinho bowed politely and kept walking, and as soon as he was around the corner, he exhaled slowly and thought, "He knows." He did not know exactly what Bastian knew, or suspected, or was planning. But Bastian was smart. The novel made that clear. And if Bastian had noticed that Kale's attention had shifted, he would want to understand why and whether it could be used. Jinho needed to talk to someone. He found Haesol in the library and told him everything. All of it. Which, in hindsight, was probably something he should have done earlier, considering Haesol was the only person in this world he trusted completely. Haesol listened to the whole explanation. Reincarnation, the novel, the plot, Kale, Bastian, with an expression of increasing stillness that Jinho recognized as him processing something huge. When Jinho finished, Haesol said, "So you're from another world?" "Yes." "And you read a book about this world?" "Yes." "And in that book the Crown Prince falls in love with Duke Eren?" "Yes. But now he seems to be falling in love with you instead." "I think so. Maybe." Haesol nodded very slowly, And there's a political villain who may have noticed. Yes. Another long pause. This is a lot, Hazel said. I know. Can I have a moment? Take as many as you need. Kim Jung-ho opened his eyes and immediately knew something was wrong. The ceiling above him was not the cracked gray plaster of his tiny apartment. It was painted white and carved with gold designs, like something from a historical drama. A chandelier the size of a small car hung above him, glittering with 100 tiny lights. Jun-ho blinked. He blinked again. The chandelier was still there. Okay, he said out loud. Okay, not good. He sat up, and the silk sheets fell from his shoulders. The room around him was enormous. There was a wardrobe tall enough to swallow a person whole, a fireplace with a marble frame, and a window that looked out over a sweeping green garden full of fountains. On the bedside table was a small mirror with a silver handle. Jun-ho picked it up and looked at his reflection. A face looked back at him, a very beautiful face. Dark hair, sharp jaw, cold eyes, lips that naturally turned down at the corners like he was permanently judging everyone. It was a face that could make a person feel like they had done something wrong just by standing near it. It was not his face. Jun-ho dropped the mirror. It did not break because it fell on the thick carpet, which was honestly a relief because he had a feeling things in this room were very expensive. He pressed his palms to his cheeks. The cheeks were real. The hands were real. He stood up on legs that felt like his but were slightly longer, walked to the full-length mirror in the corner, and stared at himself for a long moment. I am Seo Rayan, he said quietly. The name dropped from his lips like he had always known it, like it had been waiting there the whole time. Because of course it had. Because Seo Rayan was the villain of Blossoms in Winter, a boys' love novel that Jun-ho had read 3 times. He had cried twice. He had left a 5-star review under a fake username because he was too embarrassed to admit how much he loved it. And now he was inside it. Seo Rayan, cold, cruel, obsessed with the main lead, Shin Do-ha, in the most unhealthy way possible. He spent the entire novel making Do-ha's life difficult, tearing apart every relationship Do-ha tried to build. And at the end of the story, he died alone in a burning building because he had pushed away every single person who might have saved him. It was supposed to be tragic. It was supposed to make the reader feel a complicated mixture of pity and frustration. Jun-ho had felt exactly that, both times he cried. He did not want to feel that from the inside. All right, he said to his reflection. New plan. I am going to fix this. Seo Rayan in the novel had been written as someone with no warmth, no humor, and no awareness of how badly he was handling his emotions. Jun-ho, however, was a very normal 26-year-old who had watched enough drama to know that you do not set fire to someone's career because they smiled at another person. He would simply be better. He would be kind. He would stay away from Shin Do-ha and all 3 of the male leads who rotated through the story and caused Rayan to spiral every time. He would survive. He would be fine. He would go home eventually, or he would not, but either way he would not die in a burning building. He sat back down on the bed and tried to remember everything he knew about the novel. Shin Do-ha was the main character. Sweet, hard-working, completely unaware of how many people were in love with him. Second male lead was Park Yo-han, the childhood friend who had been waiting for years. Third male lead was Lee Tae-sung, the cold and distant professor who slowly melted over the course of 7 chapters. In the novel, Seo Rayan treated all of them like threats, and spent an enormous amount of energy trying to keep Do-ha isolated. What a waste of time, Jun-ho thought. What a sad and exhausting way to live. A knock on the door startled him out of his thoughts. Young Master Rayan, a voice came through the heavy wood. Your schedule begins in 1 hour. Breakfast is ready. Jun-ho stood up. He smoothed down the silk pajamas he was apparently wearing. He walked to the door and opened it with what he hoped was a calm expression. The servant on the other side was a young woman with a careful face. She gave him a small bow and waited. Thank you, Jun-ho said. She blinked at him, then she blinked again. Junho had the impression he had just said something very unexpected. Later he would find out that Seo Rayan had never once said thank you to anyone in his life. He followed her down the wide corridor toward the dining room, already working out a new plan in his head. Be polite. Be quiet. Avoid Shin Do-ha. Avoid Park Yo-han. Definitely avoid Lee Tae-sung. Keep his head down. Stay out of the plot entirely. Simple. Very simple. Except Shin Do-ha was already sitting at the breakfast table when Junho walked in, smiling up at him with those warm brown eyes that had been described in the novel as like sunlight after a long winter. And Junho's new heart, which apparently belonged to a villain who had never recovered from that smile, did something completely embarrassing inside his chest. Oh no, he thought. Oh, this was going to be a problem. Junho sat down across from Shin Do-ha and told himself very firmly to act normal. The problem was that Seo Rayan had never acted normal around Do-ha. In the novel, every single scene between them was either filled with cold silence, sharp words, or that specific kind of tension that made the readers scream into their pillows at midnight. Junho had screamed into his pillow too. He had been on the outside then. That had been the appropriate response. Now he was on the inside and screaming was not an option. You came to breakfast, Do-ha said. His voice was exactly as warm as the novel described, gentle, surprised, like Junho had done something worth noticing just by showing up. Yes, Junho said. He picked up a piece of toast. Very casual, very normal. I was hungry. Do-ha stared at him. Junho took a bite of toast. You have never come to breakfast before, Do-ha said slowly. In 3 years of living in this house, you have always had your meals sent to your room. Junho thought about this. I decided to change, he said. Another long silence. Are you feeling well? Do-ha asked. Completely fine, Junho said. This was technically a lie. He was not fine at all. He was sitting in the body of a fictional villain, eating toast across from the male lead of a boy's love novel, trying very hard not to think about the fact that his heart was beating too fast. But physically he was fine, probably. Do-ha looked at him for another moment with an expression that Junho could not quite read. In the novel, Do-ha's expressions were always described through Rayan's obsessive perspective, which meant they were never quite accurate. Rayan had interpreted every small thing Do-ha did as either a rejection or a gift, and had not understood the difference between the two. Junho was going to be more reasonable about this. He poured himself some tea, said good morning to the 2 house staff who hovered near the door, and watched their expressions go through the exact same confusion the servant had shown earlier. Apparently Seo Rayan saying good morning was on the same level as the sky falling. Great. So Rayan had been awful to everyone. Junho had some serious reputation repair to do. Rayan, Do-ha said after a moment. Junho looked up. He tried to keep his face relaxed. Thank you, Do-ha said quietly, for approving my scholarship extension last week. I know you did not have to. Junho searched through the memories that had come with the body. They were not complete memories, more like the outline of a person's life written in faint pencil. He found it. Rayan had approved the extension with a dismissive wave and then spent 2 days angry at himself for doing it. It was nothing, Junho said. It was not nothing, Do-ha said. It was everything. I just wanted you to know that. Junho looked at him. Do-ha was looking back with that expression again, the one Junho could not read. Quiet, sincere, a little careful, like he was not sure how this version of Rayan would react. And here was the thing about Junho. He was a normal, sensible person. He had never been in love in a dramatic way. His last relationship had ended because they had disagreed about what time to go to sleep, and both refused to compromise. He was not the type to be swept away by a moment. But something about Do-ha saying it was everything in that quiet voice made Junho feel like the ground had shifted slightly. He ate the rest of his toast in silence and escaped to his study as quickly as politely possible. The study was full of books and cold light and a large desk that Rayan had apparently used mostly for signing documents with a very intimidating pen. Junho sat in the chair and put his face in his hands. Okay, he said to the empty room. So he is very nice in person. That is fine. I already knew that from the novel. This changes nothing. A knock on the door. He lifted his face. Come in. The door opened and a tall man stepped inside. Junho recognized him immediately from the novel's descriptions. Dark coat, messy dark hair, a jaw that could cut glass. Park Yohan, childhood friend, second male lead. Currently at the beginning of the arc where he came back into Doha's life after 5 years abroad. In the novel, Rayan had treated Yohan like a personal enemy. Yohan looked at Junho with an expression that was somewhere between guarded and curious. "I heard you had breakfast downstairs this morning," he said. "Word travels fast," Junho said. "In this house, yes." Yohan sat in the chair across the desk without being invited, which was either very rude or very familiar. Probably both. "You look different." "I changed my hair," Junho said. This was a guess. He had no idea if it was true. Yohan looked at his hair. "You did not change your hair." "Then it must be my energy," Junho said. Yohan stared at him. Then, to Junho's complete shock, he laughed. It was a short laugh, surprised out of him like he had not planned to do it. He covered it quickly with a serious expression, but it was too late. Junho had already seen it. "What are you planning, Rayan?" Yohan asked. "Nothing," Junho said honestly. "I am planning absolutely nothing. I am just trying to get through the day." Yohan studied him for a long moment. "That is somehow the most suspicious thing you have ever said." Junho decided to change the subject. "Is there something you needed?" Yohan was quiet. Then he said, "Doha seemed happy this morning, happier than I have seen him in a long time." He paused. "I do not know what you did, but try not to undo it." He stood up and walked out, closing the door behind him. Junho sat alone in the study and thought about this for a while. Then he opened the desk drawer, found a notebook, and started writing down everything he remembered about the novel's plot. He needed to stay ahead of the story. He needed to know what was coming. He was on the 3rd page when he realized his hand was writing in Rayan's handwriting, sharp and precise and nothing like his own, and he felt the strangeness of this whole situation settle on him properly for the first time. He was really here. This was really happening. He put the pen down and looked out the window at the garden. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. One day at a time." Lee Tae-sung was not supposed to be this early in the plot. Junho had been in this world for exactly 9 days. He had been very careful. He had been polite to the staff, reasonable at meals, and had successfully avoided 3 situations that in the novel had led to Rayan doing something deeply embarrassing. He had apologized to 2 people Rayan had previously been rude to and watched their faces go through 5 stages of shock. He had started to feel like maybe he had some control over this situation. And then Lee Tae-sung walked into the main hall on a Tuesday afternoon. In the novel, Tae-sung did not appear until chapter 12. Junho was fairly certain the story was still in the early chapters. This was too soon. Something had shifted. Tae-sung was a professor at the nearby university, tall with silver-streaked dark hair that made him look like he had been designed to be intimidating. He was 32 in the novel, brilliant and cold, and carrying around a very large amount of unresolved emotional damage that he processed by working 16 hours a day and refusing to accept help from anyone. He was also, apparently, an old friend of Seo Rayan's family, which meant he had history in this house. Which meant Junho was now standing in the main hall trying to look natural, while a man who was supposed to be a romantic interest stared at him with an unreadable expression. "You look well," Tae-sung said. "Thank you," Junho said. "You also look well." A pause. "You look surprised to see me," Tae-sung said. "I am always recalibrating my expectations," Junho said, which made no sense but sounded confident. Tae-sung tilted his head slightly. In the novel, this gesture was described as something he only did when he was genuinely puzzled. "You called me here," he said. Junho's brain went very still and quiet. "I called you here," he repeated. "Your letter arrived last week." Tae-sung reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "You said you needed to speak with me about something important." Junho stared at the letter. It was Rayan's handwriting. Of course it was, because sometime in the week before Junho had taken over this body, Rayan had apparently written to Tae-sung and asked him to come. "Right," Junho said. "Yes, the letter." "What did you need to discuss?" Tae-sung asked. Junho had absolutely no idea. He looked at the letter in Tae-sung's hand and thought very fast. In the novel, Rayan's interactions with Tae-sung had all been about leverage. Rayan had known things about Taesung's past and had used that knowledge as a tool. It was one of the less flattering things about Rayan's character, and Junho had found it difficult to read, even when he had sympathy for the villain. He was not going to do that. I wanted to apologize, Junho said. Taesung went very still. For things I said to you the last time we met, Junho continued, hoping there had been a last time and that he was characterizing it correctly. It was not appropriate. I was dealing with things I should not have directed at you. The silence stretched out long enough to become uncomfortable. You are apologizing, Taesung said. Not a question. More like someone confirming a fact that did not make sense. Yes. To me, yes. Seo Rayan, Taesung said, is apologizing to me. I understand it is unexpected, Junho said. Taesung looked at him for a long moment. Then he walked past Junho toward the sitting room. I need to sit down, he said. This has been a very strange Tuesday. Junho followed him into the sitting room. A staff member appeared immediately with tea, which suggested that even the staff were paying close attention to this interaction. Junho accepted a cup and sat across from Taesung and tried to figure out what to do next. You really have changed, Taesung said after a moment. People can change, Junho said. In 9 days? So Taesung had been tracking the timeline. Interesting. Doha mentioned that you have been different lately, Taesung continued. He looked at Junho over the rim of his cup with eyes that were sharp and searching. He seemed cautiously hopeful. It is a new expression for him where you are concerned. Junho felt something pull at him. Cautiously hopeful. That was such an Doha thing to feel. Careful about wanting something good in case it went away. I do not want to make things harder for him, Junho said. It came out more honest than he intended. Taesung lowered his cup. That is the first thing you have ever said about Doha that sounds like care rather than possession. Junho looked at his own tea. I know, he said. He did not explain further. He could not explain further without explaining everything. And I transmigrated into your friend's villain from a novel I read in my previous life was not a conversation he was ready to have. Taesung stayed for 2 hours. They talked about things Junho kept careful. The property, the university, a book Taesung had published recently. Normal conversation, civilized. When Taesung left, he paused at the door. I will come again next week, he said. If that is acceptable. Yes, Junho said. Taesung nodded and left. Junho sat in the empty sitting room and thought about the fact that the plot had moved on its own. Taesung arriving early meant the story was accelerating. Something had changed in the timeline, the moment Junho had taken over Rayan's body and started behaving differently. He did not know if that was good or very, very bad. He opened the notebook to a new page and wrote, The story is shifting. Be careful. Below that, after a moment, Taesung has kind eyes under the cold ones. He closed the notebook before he could write anything else embarrassing. Are you sick? Junho looked up from the book he was reading. Park Yohan was standing in the doorway of the library, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who had been thinking about something for too long and finally decided to say it out loud. Good morning, Junho said. Are you sick? Yohan said again. Or cursed, or have you hit your head? None of those things, Junho said. Then explain what is happening. Junho put the book down. He had been reading it for 40 minutes and had retained approximately nothing because he had been thinking about the fact that the plot was moving faster than expected and he had no idea what was coming next. Having Yohan here was actually a relief, even if the conversation was going to be difficult. What specifically would you like explained? Junho asked. Yohan walked into the library and sat on the windowsill, which was a slightly dramatic place to sit but suited him. In the novel, Yohan had been written as someone with a deep undercurrent of feeling that he showed very rarely and protected very carefully. His humor was dry, his loyalty was absolute, and he had spent 5 years traveling to try to get over caring about the people in this house, and it had not worked at all. You said good morning to Minjae yesterday, Yohan said. Minjae was apparently one of the staff members. He almost fell down the stairs. That seems like a design flaw in the stairs, Junho said. Yohan stared at him. You made a joke. I make jokes. Seo Rayan does not make jokes. Junho thought about how to respond to this. The problem with pretending to be a villain who had transformed was that people kept noticing the transformation and wanting explanations. He could not exactly say he had never been Rayan in the first place. Maybe Seo Rayan got tired of being the way he was, Junho said carefully. Johan was quiet for a moment. Outside the library window, the garden was full of morning light and the sound of water from one of the fountains. It was, Junho thought, a very nice place to live. He wished he had been transmigrated into the role of someone who could enjoy it without all the villain baggage. Doha likes this version of you, Johan said. His voice was neutral, very carefully neutral. In the novel, Johan had spent a long time being neutral about things that were not actually neutral to him. That is good, Junho said. Is it? Again, not a question. Junho looked at him. Yes, he said firmly. Johan, Doha being happy is good. That is just true. It does not need to be more complicated. Something moved through Johan's expression too fast for Junho to catch. He turned to look out the window. You know what the strangest part is? Johan said. Tell me. You are kinder now. You are warmer. You are making actual human conversation. He paused. And somehow, because of all of that, Doha is spending more time near you than he ever did when you were following him around making his life difficult. Junho considered this. He had noticed it too. Doha had started appearing in the same rooms as Junho, with a kind of casual frequency that felt deliberate but looked accidental. Stopping by the library to borrow a book, asking Junho's opinion about something at dinner. Small, quiet things. People move toward warmth, Junho said. Yes, Johan said. They do. He said it like it was a conclusion he had reached about something other than the conversation. A long silence. Johan, Junho said. What? Are you in love with Doha? The silence that followed this was very loud. Johan turned from the window and looked at Junho with an expression that was close to alarm. What kind of question is that? A direct one, Junho said. I am trying direct these days. I can see that. Johan looked away again. What does it matter to you? It matters because you have been standing on that windowsill for 10 minutes, looking sad about something, and I think you deserve to have someone ask. Another silence, softer this time. You cannot tell me you care about my feelings, Johan said. You spent 3 years treating everyone in this house like furniture. I know, Junho said. I am sorry for that, genuinely. Johan turned to look at him. Really look at him. The kind of look that was measuring something. Who are you? Johan asked quietly. And for a moment Junho almost told him. He almost said, My name is Kim Junho, and I am from a different world, and I read about all of you in a novel, and I liked you very much actually, Johan. I thought you deserved better than the ending you got. Instead he said, someone trying to do better. Johan looked at him for another long moment. Then he got off the windowsill. Doha has a dinner with his scholarship committee tonight, he said. He is nervous. He will probably not say so. Thank you for telling me, Junho said. Johan nodded and left. Junho sat in the library and thought about the fact that Johan, who in the novel never trusted anyone easily, had just told him something true and personal. He had offered it like a small gift, like he was testing the ground and finding it more solid than expected. This was both heartening and terrifying because it meant people were starting to trust this version of Rayan, which meant when the plot went wrong, as it inevitably would, they were going to be hurt by it. Junho was going to have to work very hard to make sure the plot did not go wrong. He picked up his book again and stared at the page without reading anything, and thought about Doha being nervous tonight and whether it would be overstepping to say something encouraging at dinner. The answer was probably no. He would do it anyway. On day 23, Junho found the journal. It was tucked behind a loose stone in the wall of Rayan's study, which Junho had discovered by accident when he leaned against the wall looking for a book on the top shelf, and the stone moved. Behind it was a small hollow space, and inside the space was a slim leather journal with a lock that opened easily, as if it had given up on keeping its secrets. Junho sat at the desk and opened it. The first entry was dated 7 years ago. Rayan had been 18. He started reading. He read for 2 hours and he did not stop until he reached the final entry, which was dated 3 weeks before Junho had arrived in this body. By the end of it, his hands were very still on the desk, and he was staring at the opposite wall and thinking about how completely he had misunderstood Seo Rayan. The novel had written Rayan as a villain, cold, obsessive, destructive, someone whose love was possession and whose fear came out as cruelty. And all of that was true, in the way that the sharp edge of something is true without telling you about the shape of the whole thing. The journal was the whole thing. Rayan had known he was difficult. He had known it, and had hated it, and had not been able to stop. He had written about his own behavior with a clarity that was painful to read, each entry a small record of something he had done wrong and the reasons he had not been able to do it differently. He had written about Doha not as a possession but as someone he was terrified of losing, terrified in the way that made him hold too tight and not tight enough at the same time. He had written, "I do not know how to love without making it into something sharp. I think I learned this from somewhere I cannot remember. I am trying to learn differently, but I cannot find where to begin." Junho sat with that for a long time. He had come into this body assuming Rayan was the villain, and he was the reasonable replacement. But Rayan had been a real person, complicated and damaged and genuinely trying in the only way he knew how. Junho had not replaced him. He had stepped into the middle of a life that was already in pain and started acting like a different person in it. And everyone had noticed the difference, and they had all moved closer. Which meant, Junho realized with a slow and terrible clarity, that when Seo Rayan came back, if he came back, everything Junho had built would be waiting for him. He closed the journal. He sat in the quiet study. Then he took out his own notebook and wrote, "I do not think I am supposed to stay here forever. I think I might be here to start something that Rayan will have to finish." He stared at that sentence. Below it he wrote, "This is either very meaningful or very inconvenient, possibly both." At dinner that evening, Doha sat next to him. This was new. For the first 3 weeks, Doha had sat across from him, which was the safe distance. Now he was close enough that Junho could see the ink on his fingers from studying, close enough that when Doha reached for the bread, their hands almost touched. "You seem distracted," Doha said. "I found something today," Junho said. "That changed how I understand things." Doha looked at him. Good change or bad change? Junho thought about Rayan's handwriting filling page after page. Honest and sad and reaching for something better. "Complicated," Junho said, "but I think it is important." Doha nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. Doha had always been written as someone who could feel the weight in a word without needing to know the details. "Can I ask you something?" Junho said. "Yes, before things were better between us." He was careful about the phrasing. "Did you ever think Rayan could change?" Doha was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I always thought so. That was the problem, actually. I kept believing it, and then things would go badly, and I would try to stop believing it. But I could never quite manage to stop." Junho looked at him. "Why?" Doha smiled a little. "Small and quiet and very honest. Because sometimes, in between all the difficult parts, I would see something real in him, like a light through a crack, and it made me think that if the crack got wider, the whole room might be full of it." Junho felt something shift in his chest. Not the borrowed heart beating too fast. Something steadier than that. Something that felt like it belonged to him. "That is a kind way to see someone," he said. "You say that like it is unusual," Doha said. "It is," Junho said. "It really is." Later that night, lying in Rayan's bed and staring at Rayan's ceiling, Junho thought about cracks and light and a person learning to love without making it into something sharp. He thought, "I have to help Rayan come back to this, whatever this is. I have to leave it somewhere he can find it." He picked up the notebook and started writing. Not the plot notes, not the tracking of events. Something different, something like a letter. He wrote, "You are not who the story says you are. You are more than that. People can see it. Look at them and let them." He put the pen down. He hoped with everything he had that whoever read that next would understand. The thing nobody told you about being a transmigrated soul in a boy's love novel was that eventually the romantic tension would become a problem you had to actually deal with. Junho had managed 3 weeks of careful distance. He had been warm but not too warm, attentive but not obvious, and had avoided any moment that felt like it was going somewhere that would make his pulse do complicated things. He was very proud of himself. Then the three of them were in the same room at the same time for the first time, and all his careful plans became absolutely useless. It happened at a reception Junho had not known about until that morning. One of Ryan's family associates was hosting it at the house, and Junho had been told by a very apologetic staff member that he was expected to attend. He had dressed in the clothes that had been laid out for him, which were well-fitted and severe and very Ryan, and had walked into the main reception room, where 40 people were drinking wine and talking about important things. Doha was there because he worked for one of the event's sponsors. He was wearing a soft blue suit that made him look like someone had designed him specifically to make Junho's borrowed heart embarrassing. Johan was there because apparently he knew everyone and everyone knew him. He was talking to a group of people near the window and laughing at something, and he was, objectively, very hard not to look at when he laughed. Taesung was there because one of the university donors was attending, and he had been asked to represent the academic program. He was standing slightly apart from everyone else with a glass of wine and the expression of someone doing elaborate mental math. And Junho, standing in the doorway, took one look at all three of them and thought, I am going to have to be very mature about this. Doha saw him first and smiled. That warm, specific smile that Junho was starting to be able to read now. It meant, I am glad you are here. Johan looked up a moment later and raised one eyebrow, which meant, this is going to be an interesting evening. Taesung looked at him last and tilted his head slightly, which apparently was just a thing Taesung did when he was paying full attention to something. Junho walked into the room with what he hoped was a calm expression and immediately started managing distances. He spoke to Doha about the event. He greeted Johan and deflected 3 questions about his recent behavior with varying levels of success. He found himself next to Taesung at the drinks table, and they had a quiet conversation about a historical exhibition that neither of them had been to, but both found interesting based on the catalog. At some point, he ended up in a corner with all 3 of them at once, and the conversation was fine. It was actually fine. It was warm and funny, and Johan made a joke about university politics, and Taesung said something dry and precise that made Junho laugh genuinely, and Doha was looking between all of them with something bright in his expression. This is new, Doha said. What is? Junho asked. All of us talking, like this. He gestured slightly at the space between them. It is nice. Johan looked at Junho. Junho looked at Johan. They both knew what this had been like before. It is, Johan said, and his voice was sincere. Taesung looked into his wine glass and said nothing, but the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Later, when the reception had thinned out and people were leaving, Junho stepped out into the garden for air. The night was clear and cool, and the fountains were lit up, and it was the kind of moment that in a novel would have significant music playing under it. Footsteps behind him. He turned. All 3 of them had followed him out. This is not a coincidence, Junho said. We want to ask you something, Johan said. Junho looked at them, 3 people who the novel had written as love interests for Shin Doha, standing in a row in a moonlit garden, looking at the villain's face that Junho was currently wearing. Go ahead, he said. Who are you? Doha asked, quietly, seriously, not confrontational, genuinely asking. Junho was very still. What do you mean? He said. You are different, Doha said. You have been different since, I am not sure exactly when, but you are not the same as before. And I do not mean that badly. He paused. I want to understand. Taesung said. Something shifted, significantly, and quickly. Johan said nothing. He was just watching. Junho looked at the 3 of them. He thought about all the careful things he could say, all the explanations that would make sense within the logic of this world. He thought about Rayon's journal and the crack and the light. Then he said, something changed in me. I cannot explain it well, but I am not who I was. I am trying to be something better than that. And whatever happens, I want things to go well for all of you. The silence that followed was long and complicated and full of things that none of them were saying yet. Then Doha said, very softly, okay. Just okay. Like that was enough for now. Junho breathed. Johan looked up at the sky. Taesung looked at his shoes. Doha looked at Junho with those warm brown eyes and did not look away. And Junho stood in a moonlit garden in someone else's body and felt, for the first time since arriving here, like he might actually be doing something right. He also felt, somewhat more worryingly, like he was developing feelings for at least one person in this garden, and possibly all three, and this was a complication he had absolutely not planned for. One problem at a time. It started with a letter. Not a good letter. A letter from someone who had known the original Rayan very well and wanted to use that knowledge to cause problems. Junho found it on the study desk on day 31, addressed to Rayan, sealed with a black wax mark that looked like it was trying very hard to be threatening. He opened it. Inside was a very precise threat. The writer, who signed only with initials, claimed to have information about something Rayan had done 2 years ago. Something that Rayan had kept secret. Something that, if revealed, would destroy not only Rayan's reputation but would also affect Doha directly, tangling him in a scandal that had nothing to do with him. Junho read the letter twice. He sat back in the chair. In the novel, this letter had arrived and Rayan had responded to it by spiraling. He had kept it secret, tried to handle it alone, made a series of bad decisions, and the whole thing had collapsed into the burning building arc, the villain's downfall. Junho did not want that. He also did not know exactly what Rayan had done. The letter referred to the incident at the Foundation Gala, and the Rayan memories he had were incomplete. He had flashes, a party, raised voices, something broken, but not enough to understand what had actually happened. He took the letter to Johan. This surprised Johan enough that he sat down without Junho having to ask. He read the letter carefully, then he read it again. "You are telling me," Johan said. "Yes," Junho said. "You are not handling this alone and telling no one." "No," Junho said. "That seems like exactly the wrong approach." Johan looked at him for a long moment. 2 years ago at the Foundation Gala, he said slowly, something happened between Rayan and a man named Young Wonil. Wonil had been pressuring Doha about something and Rayan confronted him. Loudly, there were witnesses. Wonil left the organization shortly after. He paused. "Is that the incident?" Junho thought about this. Rayan defended Doha? In the most aggressive and embarrassing way possible, yes. Made a scene. Said things that were hard to walk back. Wonil has been quiet since then, but he has also been waiting. Junho put his hand over his mouth and thought for a moment. The thing that had seemed like a villain's possessive behavior had been, underneath it, someone trying to protect someone they loved and not knowing how to do it cleanly. And now that messy protection was coming back as a weapon. Doha should know, Junho said. Johan's eyes widened slightly. Rayan has spent 2 years making sure Doha did not know. That was the wrong choice, Junho said. Doha deserves to know what happened and why. He can handle it. Johan stared at him. "You are suggesting we tell Doha that Rayan caused a significant scandal on his behalf 2 years ago without telling him?" "Yes. Doha is going to feel guilty. Probably. And then he will feel cared for once he understands the context. And then we can deal with Wonil together, instead of Rayan, instead of me, handling it alone and making it worse." Johan sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "When did you become the sensible one?" he said. "I have always been the sensible one," Junho said. "The packaging was just misleading." They told Doha that evening. Taesung was also there because Taesung had arrived for his weekly visit, and Junho had decided that more people knowing was better than fewer. Doha listened to the whole thing without interrupting. His expression moved through several things that Junho could now read fairly well. Surprise, confusion, something tight and sad, and then, quietly, understanding. "He did that for me?" Doha asked. "Yes," Johan said. Doha was quiet. He looked at Junho with an expression Junho could not fully interpret. "Why did you not tell me before?" he asked. Junho thought about Rayan's journal, about the entry that said, "I do not know how to let people carry things with me." "Because asking for help felt like weakness," Junho said. "That was wrong. I understand that now." Doha nodded slowly. Then, "What do we do about Wonil?" Taesung said, "I know Wonil. I can have a conversation with him that makes certain his information will not damage anyone." Johan said, "And I have some history with his former associates that makes his position less secure than he thinks. Junho looked at both of them. You do not have to do this, he said. We are doing it, Johan said, simply, like it was obvious. You are not alone in this, Doha said. And he looked at Junho, and his voice was so direct and warm that Junho felt it like something physical. It was handled in 3 days. Taesung and Johan between them removed the threat so thoroughly and quietly that Wonil's letter became a piece of paper that meant nothing. The incident stayed buried. Doha was safe. Afterward, when the 4 of them were sitting in the main room with tea going cold on the table, Johan said, we should probably talk about the fact that we all just worked together without arguing once. We argued about the tea, Taesung said. That was about temperature preferences, Johan said. That does not count. Doha was smiling. Junho looked at all of them and felt something he did not have a clean word for. Something like belonging, something like warmth, something that felt, he thought, like the beginning of a very different ending from the one the novel had written. He was very careful not to say any of this out loud because he would absolutely cry, and he was trying to maintain some dignity. On day 45, Junho woke up and knew something was different. It was not anything he could see. The room was the same. The gold ceiling was the same. The chandelier was the same. But there was something in the air that felt like the moment before a door opens, that particular stillness. He got up slowly. He dressed carefully. He stood at the window for a long time looking at the garden. He had been thinking about this for days, about what it would mean when his time here ended, about Rayan, somewhere, waiting to come back into his own life, about the people here, Doha, Johan, Taesung, who had opened up to someone who was not quite who they thought he was. He went to the study. He sat at the desk. He took out the notebook and opened it to the letter he had started writing. He had been adding to it in small pieces, explanations, observations, things he had learned about all of them that Rayan might not have known. Things he wanted Rayan to know. He wrote now more clearly, more directly. He wrote about Johan's laugh, about Taesung's tilted head attention, about Doha's specific kind of warmth that came from someone who had been given reasons to close off, but had chosen not to. He wrote, they all moved toward you when you were kind. They were always capable of it. They were waiting for you to be capable of it too. He wrote, you are capable of it. I know because I lived in your life for 45 days, and I found room there for all of it. He wrote, please do not set any buildings on fire. I mean this literally, and also in the metaphorical sense. He sat back and looked at what he had written. Then he added, you did good things, remember that. You protected Doha before I arrived. That was yours. I just helped people see it. He closed the notebook and put it back in the hollow behind the stone. Then he went downstairs. The morning felt important in the way that important mornings sometimes did, quiet and full of weight. Doha was in the garden when Junho found him, sitting on a stone bench near the largest fountain, reading something. He looked up when Junho came through the glass door. Early morning, Doha said. Could not sleep, Junho said. He sat next to him on the bench. Not across, next to, close enough to feel the warmth of another person. Doha put his book down. They both looked at the fountain. I want to tell you something, Junho said. Okay, Doha said. Junho thought about how to say this without saying too much, without giving away things that would not make sense, without making it a goodbye that Doha would not understand the reason for. Whatever happens, he said carefully, things are going to be different from before. The way things have been these past weeks, that is the way things should be. You deserve people around you who see you clearly and treat you well, and I, Rayan, wants that for you. Even if it sometimes does not come out right, even if it is imperfect, the wanting is real. Doha was very quiet for a moment. Are you going somewhere? He asked. Junho looked at him. I might change a little again, he said. And if I do, be patient. There is something real underneath everything. Do not give up on it. Doha turned to look at him. His face was open and a little worried and very warm. You are being strange, he said. I am almost always strange, Junho said. That is true, Doha said, but in a new way today. Junho smiled. He could not help it. Doha looked at him and something moved through his expression. Quiet, steady, like the sun coming fully over the horizon. Whatever changes, Doha said. What matters to me is right here. This. He gestured between them. This is what I want to keep. Junho felt the fullness of that press against him. He wanted to say, me too. He wanted to say, I hope Rayon knows what he has here. He wanted to say, I will miss this very much. Instead he said, thank you for believing in people. Doha looked at him. Thank you for becoming someone worth believing in. They sat together in the garden until the morning was fully bright. Yohan joined them eventually, and then Taesung appeared at the glass door and shook his head at all of them sitting on garden benches like they had always done this, and then sat down on the steps because there was no more room. Junho sat in the middle of all of it and thought, okay, if it ends today, it ends with this, with sunlight and these people and something that got fixed enough to hold. That evening, when he lay down in Rayan's bed, he held the stillness around him and thought about Kim Junho, the person he actually was, somewhere out there. He thought about the cracked ceiling of his tiny apartment. He thought about his 5-star review left under a fake username. He thought, if you are reading this, Rayan, the real story is better than the one they wrote about you. He closed his eyes. When the world shifted, it was gentle, like a tide going out. He woke up somewhere bright, not the gold ceiling, his own ceiling, gray and cracked and very familiar. His own hands, smaller than Rayan's, holding nothing. He sat up, his apartment, his body, his life. He exhaled a breath that felt like it had been held for 45 days. Then he reached for his phone. He opened the Notes app. He typed, as fast as he could before any of it faded. Everything. Every detail. Every person. The garden in the morning. The crack in the light. What Doha said on the bench. He typed until his hands were tired. Then he leaned back against the wall of his tiny apartment and smiled at his cracked ceiling. Good luck, he said quietly, to Rayan, to all of them. Somewhere in a world he had left behind, someone who looked like him was sitting down at a breakfast table, and maybe this time they would not have to learn everything from the beginning. Maybe there was a notebook in a study with a loose stone in the wall, and inside it was a letter, and inside the letter was a map to somewhere better. Junho hoped very much that it was enough. He thought, based on everything he had seen, that it probably was. After all, the light was already through the crack. Someone just had to be willing to open the door. Kale woke up and immediately knew something was wrong. The ceiling was wrong. The smell was wrong. The weight of the blanket on his body was wrong. Too heavy, too silky. The kind that costs more than his old apartment's rent. He sat up slowly and looked around at a room that was clearly designed to make normal people feel small and unworthy. Gold edges on the furniture. Curtains that touched the floor like a royal gown. A mirror across the room so large that it showed him his full reflection without mercy. And the reflection was not his. He had brown hair now, sharp cheekbones. A jawline so clean it looked carved. He was wearing a white silk sleep shirt that was open at the collar, and he looked honestly, offensively handsome. Which would have been great, really great, except he recognized this face. This was Kale Doran's face. The villain. The secondary character from the web novel he had been reading the night before his death. He had fallen asleep with his phone in his hand, the novel open on chapter 42, the chapter where Kale Doran publicly humiliates the male lead, Ren Castell, in front of the entire noble court. 2 days later in the story, Kale Doran is dragged to the dungeons and sentenced to death. The readers cheered. The comment section said things like finally and took long enough and rot there. He, the original reader, had also thought, well, he deserved it. And now he was that person. He sat there for a long moment, then he said, very calmly, I died and came back as the man everyone hates. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. A knock came at the door. My lord, your schedule for today. Cancel it, he said. A pause. All of it, my lord. Every single thing. Another pause, longer this time. Including the meeting with Lord Ren Castell. He closed his eyes. Of course, of course. The male lead was already in the picture. The original Kale Doran had arranged a private confrontation for today, presumably to say something cruel and begin the chain of events that led to his own destruction. That was what the character had been like: petty, competitive, deeply, deeply insecure in a way that expressed itself as cruelty. He was not going to do that. "Cancel it," he said again. "Tell him I am ill." He heard the servant hesitate, but the door did not open. "Yes, my lord." He lay back down on the ridiculous silk pillow and stared at the ceiling. Okay, he needed a plan. He had died, a car accident, he vaguely remembered. Rain, a truck, a moment of terrible clarity, and been reborn inside a novel he had read on his commute. The novel had maybe 60 chapters. He had read 42. He did not know exactly how the story ended, but he knew the basic shape of it. The villain gets punished. The male lead rises to power. Everyone lives happily ever after, except the villain. The villain dies in prison. That was not going to happen to him. New plan: be the most boring, unoffensive, invisible nobleman in the history of this kingdom. Do nothing. Say nothing cruel. Attend no dramatic confrontations. Let the male lead do his heroic thing in peace. Retire early if possible. Maybe get a garden. He had always wanted a garden. He spent the rest of the morning reading through Kale Doran's personal journals, which revealed the character had been absolutely exhausting to be around. Every second page was about Ren Castell. Obsessively, bitterly, furiously about Ren Castell. How Ren looked at him, how Ren did not look at him, how Ren was too popular, too talented, too everything. He set the journal down and rubbed his face. "You were in love with him," he said out loud to the empty room, to the original Kale Doran's ghost or soul or whatever had vacated this body. "You were desperately in love with him, and you had absolutely no idea." He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the estate grounds. Green and carefully kept a fountain somewhere. 3 servants walking in a line below. It was genuinely beautiful, and he was going to appreciate it from a safe and drama-free distance for as long as possible. Then he saw the front gates. A horse, a rider in silver and gray. Tall, dark-haired, posture like someone who had been told since birth that he was important, and had somehow not let it ruin him. The rider looked up at the window, as if he felt the gaze, and their eyes met across the distance. Ren Castell, the male lead. He had come anyway. He stepped back from the window. His heart was doing something strange and fast that he chose not to examine closely. "I said cancel," he muttered, mostly to himself. "I said I was ill. I said—" A knock at the front doors, deep and loud, echoed through the entire building. He sat down on the edge of the bed, pressed his hands to his face, and made a very small sound of despair. It was not even noon yet. Ren Castell did not accept cancellations. This was, apparently, something Kale had failed to account for. He stood at the top of the staircase, wearing the most boring outfit he had found in Kale Doran's wardrobe, which was still nicer than anything he had worn in his previous life, and watched the front doors open below to reveal the most annoyingly perfect person he had ever seen in any world. Ren was tall. The novels had described him as tall, but reading tall was different from seeing a man walk through your entrance hall and fill it with his presence like he belonged there more than the furniture did. He had dark eyes and dark hair, and a face that was made for looking thoughtful and trustworthy, which, in a court full of backstabbers, was both rare and devastating. He looked up at Kale on the stairs, and something flickered in his expression. Not hostility, something else, something careful. "You look well for someone who is ill," Ren said. "I had a recovery," Kale said. "Very fast, recent medical advancement." Ren stared at him. Kale stared back. "I came," Ren said slowly, "because your letter this morning was strange." "I did not write a letter this morning. Your seal was on it." He was going to have a serious conversation with his head servant later. "What did it say?" Ren reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. He held it up but did not hand it over. His expression was now unreadable, which Kale found deeply inconvenient. "It invited me to discuss the matter of the northern trade routes," and then at the bottom, in different ink, it said, and I am quoting directly, "Forget it. Do not come." "I changed my mind. Burn this letter." He stared at the letter. He stared at the letter. "So," Ren continued, "naturally I came immediately. That is not what naturally means. It is when I am involved. Dren folded the letter and tucked it back in his coat with the energy of a man who had won something. I want to know what you wanted to say before you changed your mind. Kale descended the stairs because looming at the top felt theatrical, and he was trying very hard not to be theatrical. He stopped at the bottom, at a reasonable distance, and looked at Ren with what he hoped was a calm and unbothered expression. The original letter was a mistake, he said. The second note was the correction. You should have heeded the correction. I rarely heed things. Clearly. Ren looked at him with those dark eyes, and there was something genuinely searching in the look, like he was trying to find something in Kale's face that he expected to be there and was confused by its absence, probably expecting hostility. The original Kale would have already said something cutting by now, something designed to wound. He just didn't have it in him. It wasn't who he was, even in this body. The northern trade routes, he said finally, because he needed to say something. If you are truly here, we may as well discuss them. I have no interest in the current arrangement, and I suspect you don't either. Ren blinked, slowly, like a very beautiful and very confused owl. You want to talk about trade. That is what I said. You, Kale Doran, want to sit down and discuss northern trade routes. Is that sentence difficult? I can repeat it more slowly. A pause. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, Ren laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one, short and surprised, like it escaped before he could stop it. He pressed 2 fingers to his mouth immediately after, as if he could push it back in. Kale felt something warm shift in his chest and firmly ignored it. They sat across from each other in the east sitting room, which was less aggressively gold than the rest of the manor, and a servant brought tea that Kale did not order but was grateful for. He wrapped his hands around the cup and let the heat steady him. They talked about trade routes for 40 minutes. It was the most normal 40 minutes Kale had experienced since waking up in this body. Ren was sharp, genuinely, irritatingly sharp. He caught implications fast and responded without wasting words. He disagreed twice, and both times he explained exactly why, with evidence, without condescension. Kale found himself leaning forward at one point without meaning to. When Ren stood to leave, he paused at the door. You are different, he said. Not an accusation, just an observation. People change, Kale said. Ren looked at him for a moment that lasted slightly too long. Yes, he said, they do. After the door closed, Kale sat alone in the sitting room for a long time. His heart was doing the strange fast thing again. He poured himself more tea. He was going to need a lot of tea. Within a week, people were talking. This was, Kale understood, inevitable. He had made the mistake of existing in a small noble society, while behaving differently from how they expected him to behave. He had skipped 2 of the court gatherings that the original Kale had always attended, for the purpose of causing scenes. He had been polite to 3 people the original Kale had been publicly rude to. He had smiled at a servant in public, which apparently was worth a 4-paragraph letter to the gossip columnist of the kingdom's most read broadsheet. The headline was, Is Lord Doran ill? Subheadline, Sources close to the estate confirm strange calm. 1 servant reports being thanked. He held the paper, read it twice, and set it down. He picked it up and read it a 3rd time because surely it wasn't as absurd as he thought. It was exactly as absurd as he thought. The second rumor was worse. It spread through 3 dinner parties and arrived at his door in the form of his cousin Mira, who was cheerful and nosy, and arrived unannounced on a Thursday morning with a basket of fruit and the expression of someone who had information to sell. They are saying, Mira said, setting the basket down and sitting without being invited, that you met with Ren Castell. I met with many people, privately, for 40 minutes. We discussed trade. Mira stared at him with enormous brown eyes that saw too much. Kale, you once threw a wine glass at him at a party. I don't remember that. It was 6 months ago. There were 40 witnesses. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Right. He kept forgetting that the original Kale had a whole history of behavior that he was now inexplicably not repeating. I am choosing a different approach to that relationship. What kind of approach? A civil one. Mira was quiet for a second. Then she said very gently, as if speaking to someone who might be fragile, Are you having a breakdown? No. Are you sure? Because last month you called Ren Castell I didn't call him anything. That was... He stopped. He couldn't exactly say that was the previous soul in this body. He pressed his hands together. I was wrong to say whatever I said. I am choosing to be better. Mira stared at him for a long, long moment. Then she reached across the table, took one of her own fruit, and bit into it thoughtfully. He came to see you again yesterday, she said. He looked up. What? Ren Castell. He was seen outside your gates. He did not come in. He sat on his horse for a while and then left. Something happened in his chest that was inconvenient and unexplained. Why would he do that? Mira shrugged. You tell me. You are the one having the civil relationship with him. He didn't have an answer. He thought about it for the rest of the day, between reading through estate paperwork and writing 3 polite refusals to invitations he had no interest in attending. Why would Ren come and not come in? The male lead of the novel was not shy. He was bold and principled, and had exactly 0 history of hesitating about anything. Unless he was unsure. Unless something about their meeting had made him unsure. He stared at the wall for a while. Then, against every instinct telling him to stay uninvolved, he wrote a short note, 7 words. He sealed it with his ring, and sent it before he could change his mind. The note said, "The gates are open, if you want." He did not sleep well that night. The next morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, someone knocked on the front door. He heard his servant answer it. He heard a familiar voice say, "I received a note." He sat at the breakfast table, poured his tea with a completely steady hand, and thought, okay, this is fine. This is totally, completely fine. Ren walked in, looking like he had not lost any sleep at all, which Kale found deeply unfair. You sent for me, Ren said. I opened the gates, Kale said. There is a difference. Ren sat down across from him, helped himself to the spare cup without asking, and said, Tell me what you actually want, Kale. The sound of his name in that voice did something strange to the air in the room. He wrapped both hands around his own cup and said, very carefully, I want to stop being enemies. Ren looked at him for a long moment. All right, he said. Just that, all right. As if it were that simple. As if everything between them could pivot on 2 quiet words over a breakfast table. Maybe it could. Not enemies was not the same as friends. Kale understood this. He had negotiated office politics in his previous life, and he understood that the space between hostility and warmth was wide and full of landmines. They were cordial now. They attended the same meetings without disaster. Ren stopped looking at him like he was waiting for an attack. Kale stopped bracing for the plot to push them into a confrontation he didn't want. It was going well. He was genuinely proud of himself. Then he found the letter. It was in the original Kale's desk drawer, buried under account books and old correspondence. Unsealed, unfinished, written in handwriting that was the same as his own, but with a different energy, sharper and more erratic. He almost put it down unread. Then he saw the first line. It said, I know you hate me, and I know you are right to. He sat down slowly and read the whole thing. It was a letter Kale Doran had written to Ren, probably 3 years ago based on the date in the corner, and had never sent. It was not cruel. It was the opposite of cruel. It was raw and honest and desperate in a way that the character's public face never was. He wrote about watching Ren succeed at everything and feeling simultaneously proud and ashamed of his own smallness. He wrote about the night their fathers had fought over a political deal when they were 17, and how everything had broken between them over money and ambition and the pride of old men. He wrote about missing something he wasn't sure had ever existed. At the bottom he had written, I think I have been angry at you because being angry is easier than admitting that I am afraid you will never see me as anything worth seeing. Kale set the letter down. He sat with it for a long time. He thought about the original Kale Doran, the one whose body he wore, the one who had been written as a villain and had played the part because playing a part felt safer than admitting to something real. He thought about how the comment section had called him petty and cruel and had cheered his downfall without ever knowing about the unfinished letter in the desk drawer. He thought about Ren, who had come back, who had sat down across from him and said all right, who had been outside the gates. He thought about the thing in his own chest that he was still very carefully not examining. He folded the letter and put it in his pocket. That evening, he went to the court reception he had been avoiding for 2 weeks. He told himself it was because he could not avoid social obligations forever. He did not tell himself that he knew Ren would be there. He found Ren standing near the window, talking to someone, and he waited at a distance until the conversation ended. Ren turned and saw him, and something in his face shifted. Not surprise, exactly, something softer. "You came," Ren said. "It was time," Kale said. They stood together at the window for a while without needing to fill the silence. The room around them was full of conversation and music and the clink of glasses. Someone across the room laughed very loudly. Neither of them looked away from the window. "Can I ask you something?" Kale said. "You can try," Ren said, which was not quite yes, but was as close as he got. "The night our fathers argued, when we were 17. He watched Ren go still beside him. What did you think of me after that?" A pause. "Long enough to be honest. I thought you were the only person in that room who looked as miserable as I felt," Ren said quietly. "And I thought that if things had been different, we might have been on the same side." He said nothing. Ren turned to look at him. "Why are you asking me this now?" "I found something old," he said. "It made me think about things I had not considered before." Ren looked at him with those eyes that saw too much, the same way Mira looked at him, except when Mira did it, it was annoying, and when Ren did it, it was something else entirely. "Are you all right?" Ren asked, and the question was so quiet and so genuine that he almost laughed. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I think I will be. It happened at the wrong time, as these things always do. There was a political crisis, because there was always a political crisis in stories like this one. A trade delegation from the northern provinces arrived 3 days early and demanded an emergency council session, and somewhere in the middle of the scheduling chaos, a document leaked. A private correspondence between Lord Doran's estate and a merchant group that the original Kale had been dealing with before his soul had been replaced by a very confused reader from a different world entirely. The document looked, to anyone reading it without context, like evidence of financial manipulation, maybe even treason, depending on the interpretation and how generous the council was feeling. It was not generous. Kale sat in the council room and listened to the accusations and kept his expression carefully neutral because panic was not going to help him, and also because a small part of his brain was noting with detached horror that this was exactly the moment in the novel that began Kale Doran's downfall. He had read this chapter. He remembered it. The document, the accusations, the trial. In the original novel, Kale Doran had responded with defensive rage and made everything worse. He was not going to do that. He said, clearly and without raising his voice, "I was not aware of this correspondence. I will provide full access to my estate records and cooperate with any formal inquiry." This was apparently so unexpected that the room went quiet. He looked at the faces around the table. Political animals, all of them. They had prepared for a fight. He had declined to fight. And then Ren spoke. "I will serve as independent witness to the inquiry," Ren said, from the far end of the table, in a tone that was not loud but that everyone heard. "Given the history between Lord Doran and myself, my involvement should satisfy any concern about partiality in his favor." Several heads turned. Kale turned too, and found Ren looking at him steadily. He didn't understand. In the novel, Ren had been one of the voices calling for Kale's punishment. He had been just. He had believed the evidence. He had stood on the side of the truth as he understood it, which was the truth as it was presented to him, because no one had offered him a different version. He had not stepped forward. He was stepping forward now. After the session, in the corridor, Kale caught up to him. "Why did you do that?" he asked. Ren turned. He looked tired, which was new. Ren in the novel never looked tired. "Because you asked for an inquiry rather than a fight. Innocent people ask for inquiries. Guilty people attack. That is not a safe bet on your part. I know. If the investigation goes badly, I know," Ren said again. He stared at him. "You don't know me well enough to take that risk." Something moved in Ren's eyes. Something that had been building there for weeks. "Maybe I know you better than you think," he said. "Or maybe I want to." The corridor was empty. The stone walls held the sound in. His heartbeat was very loud in his own ears. "Ren," he said, and his voice came out wrong, lower, and more honest than he intended. "Don't," Ren said quietly, not unkindly. "Not yet. Let the inquiry finish first. Let everything settle." He paused. "I'm not going anywhere." He stood there after Ren walked away and did something he had not done since waking up in this world. He let himself feel it, all of it. The strange, terrifying warmth, the impossibility of it. The fact that he had come here planning to be invisible and instead had somehow walked into the center of the story in a way that had nothing to do with the plot he had read and everything to do with choices neither of them had made in the original novel. He leaned against the wall and looked at the ceiling and thought, "This is not going according to any plan I had." Then he thought, "But maybe that is okay." The inquiry took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of investigators going through his estate records with the methodical enthusiasm of people who enjoyed finding problems. 2 weeks of Kale sitting calmly in rooms and answering questions and resisting the urge to explain that the person who had set up the suspicious correspondence had been himself, but also not himself, a previous occupant of this body, a fictional character who had probably had reasons that were never going to make complete sense because villains in web novels were not usually written with complex inner lives, unless the novel was specifically about them. On day 4, Mira visited. She sat across from him with her fruit basket and her 2 seeing eyes and said, "You are very calm for someone whose estate is under investigation. Panic would not help. It would help me feel like you understand the situation." "I understand the situation." She peeled something orange and ate it thoughtfully. "Ren Castell visited the investigators yesterday." He looked up. "Voluntarily," she added. "He brought his own documentation. Trade records from the last 3 years showing that the merchant group in question had approached him first and that he had declined. It establishes a pattern of behavior that makes the correspondence look different." He was quiet for a moment. "He didn't tell me he was going to do that." "Would you have let him if he had asked?" "No," he thought. He would have said it was too much risk. He would have tried to handle it alone because that was what he did, even now, even after everything. "No," he said out loud. Mira nodded like she had known. "He knows you too." On day 9, there was a development that no one expected. One of the merchants in the correspondence came forward, voluntarily. He had heard about the inquiry and about Ren Castell's involvement, and had apparently calculated that getting ahead of the story was better than waiting for it to catch up with him. He submitted a full account of the original negotiation, which confirmed that Kale Doran had agreed to the arrangement, and then 2 months later, right around the time a certain reader from a different world had moved into the body, had sent a letter refusing to continue and returning the initial payment. Which Kale had no memory of doing, because he hadn't done it. The original soul, the original Kale Doran, in the weeks before the accident, that had apparently created enough chaos in the cosmic administration to allow a new occupant, had changed his mind, had pulled back from the deal, had tried, quietly, to be better. He sat with this information alone in his study at night and felt something complicated and sad. The villain had tried. In those last weeks, the villain had actually tried. And then he had died and been replaced, and nobody, not even the people who hated him, had known. He thought about the unfinished letter in his pocket. "I think I have been angry at you because being angry is easier than admitting that I am afraid. We were not so different," he said quietly to the room, to whoever was listening or not listening, "you and I." On day 14, the council cleared him. The hall was full when the decision was announced. He heard it and nodded and said thank you with appropriate gravity, and spent the next hour accepting polite congratulations from people who had probably expected him to be convicted, and were adjusting their opinions in real time. Across the room, he found Ren watching him. He excused himself from the conversation he was in and walked over. "Thank you," he said. The 2 words felt too small. "You would have been fine without me," Ren said. "Maybe, but I was not alone because of you. That mattered." Ren looked at him, and the careful distance he always kept in his expression was not quite in place. Something underneath it was showing through. "You said you wanted to stop being enemies," Ren said. "Back at the beginning. Do you remember?" "I remember." "What do you want now?" He had been asking himself that question for weeks. He thought about the garden he had wanted, the quiet life, the plan to be invisible. He looked at Ren. "Something I did not plan for," he said honestly. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know the feeling. They were not good at this. This was the thing no one warned you about. In novels, when two characters finally moved past their history, there was usually a montage, sweet moments, growing closeness, a natural progression toward the confession that everyone had been waiting for. In reality, which is what this was, even if it was technically fictional, two people who had been on opposite sides of something for years did not suddenly become graceful about being on the same side. Kale forgot to say things, important things. He would realize 3 hours after a conversation that Ren had said something that deserved a real response, and he had just changed the subject because emotional honesty made his brain short-circuit, and apparently this was true in any world he existed in. Ren, for his part, said too much in the wrong moments, and too little in the right ones. He was decisive about everything except this, which he seemed to be approaching with the same careful slowness that you used around something you were afraid of breaking. They had dinner twice. It was nice, and also terrible, because Kale spent both dinners very aware of exactly how Ren held his fork, and exactly how his face changed when he was about to disagree with something, which was information he did not need to be collecting, but was collecting anyway. Mira sent him a letter that said only, "Just tell him." She underlined it twice. He wrote back telling her to mind her business. She sent another letter that said, "You have no business sense when it comes to your own heart." She was not wrong, which was annoying. The complication arrived in the form of Lord Evander Castine, who was handsome and charming and had known Ren for years, and who began appearing at every event Ren attended with the practiced ease of someone who had been there before Kale and would like to be there after him. He was not jealous. He was simply noticing things with great detail and frequency. He noticed that Evander made Ren laugh easily. He noticed that they had history he was not part of. He noticed that Evander touched Ren's arm when he talked to him, and that Ren did not move away. He noticed all of this very carefully, and then he went home and sat in his study and stared at nothing. He was not Kale Doran, not really. He had no claim. He had not even said anything clearly. He had said something he did not plan for and let it sit there, unfinished, because he was apparently constitutionally incapable of finishing important things, like certain letters. He took the original letter out of his pocket. He had been carrying it for weeks without knowing why. He read the last line again. "I think I have been angry at you, because being angry is easier than admitting that I am afraid you will never see me as anything worth seeing." He thought, "I know exactly how you felt." Then he thought, "But you never sent it. You kept it in a drawer. You let your chance close." He thought, "I am not going to make the same mistake." He sat down. He wrote, not a grand letter, not a long one, just something true, in as simple and honest words as he could find. He sealed it. He sent it before dawn so he could not change his mind. The next morning, at a time that was extremely early and inconsiderate, someone knocked on his door. He was still in his sleep shirt. His hair was in chaos. He looked, objectively, terrible. He opened the door anyway. Ren was standing there. He was holding the letter, open. He looked like he had not slept. He looked like he had been writing since before sunrise. He looked at Kale standing in the doorway, being obviously unprepared, and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You could have told me to my face. I was afraid you would say something kind and I would not survive it," Kale said. Ren stared at him. Then he exhaled, long and slow, like he was setting something heavy down. "Evander is a friend," he said. "An old one, nothing more. That is not... It is exactly what you were thinking about, and we both know it." He stepped closer, and the early morning light was behind him, and he said quietly, "I am not interested in Evander." His heart was beating everywhere. "Who are you interested in?" he asked, and his voice was very steady. He was proud of it. Ren looked at him the way he had looked at him in the corridor weeks ago, with something showing through the careful surface. "You know the answer to that," Ren said. He did not get the quiet life he planned. He got something better. The garden happened first, actually. He had started it in the 3rd month, in a corner of the estate grounds that had been unused and overgrown, and he worked on it himself in the early mornings before the day got complicated. tomatoes, some herbs, flowers in 3 colors because color had been absent from the original Kale's life, and he was correcting that. Ren found out about the garden on a Tuesday. He arrived at the estate unannounced, which had become his signature move, and could not find Kale in the house, and eventually walked out to the grounds and stood at the edge of the garden, looking at Kale crouched in the dirt, with his sleeves rolled up, doing something to a tomato plant. "You are gardening," Ren said. "Yes. You, Kale Doran, are gardening. You say my full name like it surprises you every time." He looked up. "Are you going to stand there or are you going to help?" Ren looked at his coat. He looked at the dirt. He looked back at his coat. Then he took his coat off, folded it over the fence with extreme care, rolled up his sleeves, and came into the garden. He was terrible at it. He pulled up something that was not a weed and then apologized to it, which was maybe the most human thing Kale had ever seen him do. Kale laughed properly, the kind of laugh that surprised him by existing. "Do not laugh," Ren said, holding the plant he had murdered. "I am absolutely going to laugh. It looked like a weed. It was a basil seedling I planted last week." "They look the same." "They absolutely do not look the same." He took the plant from Ren's hand. Their fingers touched. Neither of them moved for a moment. "You owe me a basil plant." "I will buy you 10 basil plants," Ren said. His voice had gone quieter. He was looking at Kale with that look. "1 is fine," Kale said. His voice had also gone quieter. They were very close together in the small garden. "Kale," Ren said. "Yes." "I would like to." "Yes," he said again, before Ren could finish. Ren blinked. "I didn't finish the sentence." "I know what you were going to say." "You don't know. You were going to ask if you could kiss me," Kale said. "The answer is yes. You can finish the sentence if you want, but it will not change the answer." Ren stared at him. Then he smiled. Not the careful public smile. A real one, warm and slightly undone at the edges. "You are very strange," Ren said. "I am aware." He kissed him in the garden, surrounded by tomatoes and the herbs and the 3 colors of flowers, in the early morning light, with dirt on both of their hands. It was unheroic and soft, and it lasted longer than either of them planned. When they stepped back, Ren looked at him with an expression that Kale was going to be thinking about for a very long time. "I have been wanting to do that," Ren said, "since approximately the 2nd time I had tea in your sitting room." "You could have said so. You could have said so. I sent a letter. After 4 months of saying nothing." He considered this. "I was gathering courage. In extremely small amounts. Courage cannot be rushed." He turned back to the garden. "Also, you pulled up my basil. I am going to hear about the basil forever. Until you replace it. Which could be tomorrow." Ren laughed again. This one was even better than the first. It was the laugh of someone who was not managing himself around Kale anymore. Not calculating, not careful, just present. The months after that were not quiet. They were never going to be quiet, because the world they lived in had politics and crises, and Mira, who found out about the garden kiss within approximately 48 hours, and sent him a letter that was just the word, finally written very large. He wrote back, "Please never write to me again." She wrote back, "Not a chance." There was a second political crisis in autumn that they navigated together. There was a winter where Ren spent so much time at the estate that he had a room, and then he was there more often than not. And then one morning Kale woke up and Ren was already in the kitchen making tea badly and complaining about the kettle, and it was so ordinary and so good that he stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking. "You are staring," Ren said without turning around. "I am appreciating." "Same thing." "Not always." Ren turned. He held out a cup. The tea was slightly too strong. It always was. Kale had decided this was a permanent feature of the relationship, and he was fine with it. He took the cup. He stood next to Ren in the kitchen in the morning light and drank the too strong tea. He thought about the plan he had made on the first morning. Be invisible, 'cause no drama, get a garden, exit the story as quietly as possible. He had the garden. The rest of it had not gone according to plan at all. He thought about the original Kale Doran, who had never sent the letter, who had died with it in his desk drawer, unsent. He thought about the part of himself that was still, in some ways, just a reader who had stumbled into the wrong body and tried to do right by it. He hoped, wherever the original soul was, that he knew. That someone had read the letter. That the gates had been opened. That the garden was growing. That in the end, even the villain got to be loved. Ren nudged his shoulder. You are doing it again. What? The thing where you go very quiet and very far away. He looked at him. I was just thinking. About what? He considered how to answer that. About how I came here wanting to disappear, he said finally, and ended up doing the opposite. Ren looked at him for a moment. Then he set his own cup down and said, Are you unhappy about that? He thought about it seriously, the way the question deserved. No, he said. I think I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Ren smiled. Just a small one. Good, he said. And it was. Kai had a list. Number 1, make Ren and Seo meet at the school festival. Number 2, pretend to be mean so Seo runs to Ren for comfort. Number 3, stay invisible, do the job, and go home. Simple, clean, emotionless. Except the universe clearly did not get the memo. It started on a Tuesday. Kai was sitting in the corner of the school cafeteria, eating his lunch in peace. Or what should have been peace. Except the boy sitting directly across from him kept dropping his chopsticks, over and over. Clatter, pick up, clatter, pick up. Kai looked up. Seo Jingyo was staring at him with wide, panicked eyes. He had soft brown hair, a sweater 2 sizes too big, and the general energy of a puppy who had just walked into a glass door. Sorry, Seo whispered. I keep dropping them. I noticed, Kai said flatly. Seo smiled anyway. Big, warm, completely unbothered by Kai's tone. I'm Seo Jinho. I just transferred here. Are you in class 2B? No. Oh. Seo blinked. Then why are you sitting at the class 2B table? Kai looked at the table, then at his tray. Then at the tiny handmade sign that said class 2B that he had absolutely not noticed when he sat down. He picked up his tray and left without a word. Behind him, he heard Seo giggle. Kai's eye twitched. This was fine. This was completely fine. He just needed to get Seo to meet Ren Han, the most popular boy in school, the golden boy with the warm smile and the perfect hair, that probably stayed perfect even during typhoons, and then Kai's job here was done. Kai had been watching Ren for 3 weeks now, gathering information like a very tired and underpaid detective. Ren liked early mornings, hated loud noises, volunteered at the library on Wednesdays, and apparently had the ability to make every person in a room feel like they were the most important person alive. Kai, on the other hand, had the ability to make people feel like they owed him money. It was fine. It was a gift. He found Seo again after school, standing at the gate with a campus map, turning it upside down, then sideways, then upside down again. Kai stopped walking. He should keep going. He really should. You're reading it wrong, he said. Seo turned the map right side up and beamed. Oh, that makes so much more sense. Thank you, Kai. Kai. Seo repeated his name like he was tasting it. That's a cool name. Very sharp, like a knife or something. Kai stared at him. Was that a compliment? Absolutely. Seo nodded very seriously. Kai had been called intimidating, cold, strange, and, once, memorably, the human version of a thunderstorm. Nobody had ever called him sharp like a knife and meant it warmly. He did not know what to do with that. The library is that way, Kai said, pointing. Ren Han volunteers there on Wednesdays. He can help you find your classrooms. Seo tilted his head. How do you know where the library is if you're not in class 2B? I know where everything is. That's either really impressive or a little scary. Both, Kai said, and walked away. He told himself that the small smile on his face was because the plan was working. Seo would find the library. He would find Ren. They would fall in love on schedule, and Kai could go back to eating his lunch at an empty table and not having conversations with boys who dropped their chopsticks. Behind him, he heard Seo call out, I'll save you a seat tomorrow, at the right table this time. Kai kept walking. He absolutely did not slow down when he heard that. The next morning, Kai arrived at school and stood outside the cafeteria for approximately 4 minutes before he went inside and sat, for reasons he refused to examine, at a table near the windows. Seo was already there. He had saved a seat, with a little sticky note that said, "For the knife named boy." Kai sat down. He did not say anything. He opened his lunchbox and started eating. Seo smiled at him like Kai had just done something very sweet. This, Kai thought, was going to be a problem. The thing about being the villain is that you have to commit. Kai had done his research. The best way to push two people together was to give them a common enemy, and the best common enemy was someone who could be cold and difficult, and just annoying enough to make the hero feel protective. Kai was built for this role. He had the face for it. The problem was Seo Jinho. Specifically, the problem was that Seo Jinho refused to be scared of him. On Wednesday, Kai walked Seo to the library. Not on purpose. They were just going in the same direction, totally different reasons. Kai needed a book, sure. Ren was at the front desk, sorting returned books with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. He looked up when they walked in, and his entire face changed, like sunlight coming through a window. That was the thing about Ren Han. He made everyone feel like they mattered. "You must be the transfer student," Ren said, smiling at Seo. "I heard you got lost 3 times today." Seo laughed. 4, actually. I also ended up in the faculty bathroom. Ren laughed too. It was a good laugh, warm and real. Kai stood to the side and watched. Good. This was good. The plan was working. So why did he feel like someone had put a small rock in his shoe? "Is this your friend?" Ren asked, looking at Kai. Seo nodded cheerfully. "That's Kai. He's very sharp, like a knife." Ren blinked, then looked at Kai with something like curiosity. "Kai, I've seen you around. You're in class 3A, right? You always eat alone." Kai did not like being observed. "I like eating alone. He also saved me from reading a map upside down," Seo added, "and he told me to come find you." Ren's eyebrows went up. He looked at Kai differently now, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You sent him to me? He needs help navigating," Kai said flatly. "You volunteer here." It made sense. Ren studied him for a moment. Then he smiled slowly. "Sure. Makes sense." Something about the way he said it made Kai uncomfortable. He left quickly and spent the walk back to his classroom telling himself this was fine. Phase 1 was complete. Seo and Ren had met. They had laughed together. Ren had that look he got when he liked someone. It was all going perfectly. He should feel satisfied, like a chess player who had moved his pieces well. Instead, he felt strangely hollow, like he had given something away without meaning to. At lunch the next day, Seo came and sat next to him again. Ren was with him this time, tray in hand, looking at Kai with that same curious expression. "Can we sit here?" Ren asked. "It's a free country," Kai said. They sat. All 3 of them ate in silence for about 30 seconds before Seo said, "Kai, what's your favorite color?" And the entire dynamic shifted because apparently Seo treated lunches like job interviews, asking questions rapid fire. Favorite color, favorite season, most embarrassing moment, ideal weekend. And both Kai and Ren ended up answering without realizing they were doing it. Kai said his favorite color was gray. Seo said that was very on brand. Ren said his was blue, and Seo clapped like this was the best news he had ever received. "Why are you so excited about that?" Ren asked, laughing. "Because blue is calming. It means you're a peaceful person. Kai is gray, which means he is mysterious and layered like an onion." Kai put down his chopsticks. "An onion. In a good way," Seo said very seriously. Ren was watching Kai with that look again, not unfriendly, just attentive. Like Kai was interesting to him. Kai looked away. He was supposed to be the villain. Villains did not get looked at like that. That afternoon, Kai went back to his room and reviewed his plan. Everything was on track. Seo clearly liked Ren. Ren was clearly charmed by Seo. By the end of the month, they would be a couple, and Kai's weird, unexplainable sense of purpose here would be done. He fell asleep with his notebook open on his chest, his list of matchmaking steps half finished. He dreamed about blue eyes, and someone saying his name like it was warm. When he woke up, he stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he wrote at the bottom of his list, "Do not get attached. This is not your story." He underlined it twice. The school culture festival was in 2 weeks. It was, according to Kai's calculations, the perfect moment. Decorations, soft lighting, crowded spaces. Every romance story had a festival scene. It was practically a law. Kai had planned it in full detail. Seo would get a bit lost. Kai would casually mention that Ren was helping at the photography booth. Seo would go find him. They would take photos together. The lighting would be golden, and Cupid could take over from there. Easy, foolproof. What Kai had not planned for was Seo showing up at his door the night before the festival looking like he was about to cry. Kai stared at him. "What's wrong?" "I found out that Ren's ex-boyfriend is coming to the festival," Seo said. "His name is Park Do-hyun. He's very tall and very handsome, and apparently they broke up 6 months ago because of something complicated. And I don't know if Ren still has feelings for him, and Seo stopped, took a breath. "Sorry, I don't know why I came here." Kai stepped back from the door. "Come in." Seo came in. He sat on Kai's floor, not the chair, the floor, and pulled his knees to his chest. Kai sat across from him and did not comment on the floor thing. "Tell me what you know," Kai said. So Seo told him everything. He had heard the story from a classmate. Park Do-hyun and Ren had dated for nearly a year. Do-hyun had left for a study program abroad, and they had tried long distance, but it fell apart. Nobody knew whose fault it was. Ren had been quiet for months after. Kai listened. "Do you think Ren still likes him?" Seo asked quietly. Kai thought about it honestly. He had watched Ren for 3 weeks. He had eaten lunch with him for 2 weeks now. Ren was warm and open about most things, but whenever someone mentioned past relationships, he got very still and changed the subject. "I don't know," Kai said. And because lying to Seo felt wrong in a way he could not explain. "But I know Ren looks at you differently than he looks at other people." Seo looked up. "What do you mean?" "He's curious about you. He asks questions. He saves the seat next to him when you're late." Kai paused. "He doesn't do that with other people. I've watched." Seo's face did something complicated. Then he said, "You're surprisingly observant for someone who pretends not to care about anything." Kai said nothing. "Why do you do that?" Seo asked. "Pretend, I mean." "Who says I'm pretending?" Seo just looked at him, calm and steady, the way he sometimes got when he stopped being cheerful and became something quieter, more real. "You walked me to the library," Seo said. "You told me to find Ren. You keep showing up even though you always act like you don't want to be there. That's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care." Kai looked at his window. "Go to the festival tomorrow. Don't avoid Ren because of Do-hyun. If Ren has feelings for his ex, you should know that anyway. And if he does, then at least you know. You can't make good decisions without the truth." Seo was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What do you get out of this, Kai? Out of helping me and Ren?" Kai opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because the honest answer was something he had not let himself think about. He had a reason once, a plan, a role to play, but somewhere in the past 3 weeks, the plan had started to feel less like strategy and more like self-punishment. "I should go," Seo said softly. He stood up and looked at Kai. "Thank you for listening." After he left, Kai sat alone on his floor for a long time. He pulled out his notebook, found the line he had written. "Do not get attached. This is not your story." He stared at it. Then slowly he closed the notebook. The festival was tomorrow. He would finish what he started. He had to. The festival was loud, bright, and smelled like fried food and regret. Kai stood near the entrance with his hands in his pockets, watching the crowds move. He had not planned to walk around. He was just there to make sure the plan worked. Quality control, professional. He spotted Ren at the photography booth 10 minutes in. Ren was wearing a soft cream-colored shirt and had a camera around his neck, laughing at something a classmate said. He looked easy and light, like nothing in the world was heavy. It was almost annoying how good he looked. Not that Kai noticed. That was purely an objective observation. Kai found Seo near the food stalls, holding a skewer of rice cakes with both hands and staring at them like they had personally wronged him. "Go find Ren," Kai said. Seo jumped. "You are so loud for a quiet person." "I am not loud. I just exist with purpose." Kai pointed toward the photography booth. "He's over there." Seo's face did the complicated thing again. What if Do-hyun is with him? Then you meet Do-hyun. Knowing your rivals is important. Seo choked on his rice cake. "My rival? I didn't say I was. You came to my room the night before the festival because you were worried about Ren's ex-boyfriend. That's a rival situation." Seo looked at the skewer in his hands, then at the photography booth, then at Kai. "Come with me," he said. Kai blinked. "No. Please. I'll be weird and nervous alone. You're always very calm, like a wall, or a very stable piece of furniture. You compare me to furniture a lot. Is that a yes?" It was not supposed to be a yes. Kai was supposed to send Seo over there alone, observe from a distance, make sure sparks happened, and then leave. That was the plan. That was always the plan. "Fine," Kai said. For 3 minutes. They walked to the booth together. Ren saw them coming, and his face lit up, first landing on Seo with warmth, then sliding to Kai with that careful, curious look that Kai had started to dread. "You both came," Ren said, like it was a gift. "Kai made me walk over here," Seo said, which was only technically true. "I made you nothing," Kai said. Ren laughed. He handed Seo the camera. "Here, take a photo of something you like." Seo took the camera very seriously, spending about 45 seconds framing a shot of the decorations before taking it. Then he turned the camera toward Kai and Ren without warning. "Your turn," Seo said. "I'm not," Kai started. Click. Seo looked at the screen and smiled a smile that meant something Kai could not decode. He tilted the camera toward Kai so he could see. Kai stared at the photo. Ren was looking at Seo and smiling, but Kai was looking at Ren. Not the way a person looks at a friend. Not the way a villain watches a target. The way someone looks at something they have decided not to want. Kai's chest did something strange and unhelpful. "I want a copy," Seo said cheerfully. Kai was going to delete that photo from the face of the earth. Then Park Do-hyun appeared. He was, as Seo had predicted, very tall and very handsome, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from knowing exactly how you looked. He came up to the booth and stopped when he saw Ren. "Hey," Do-hyun said. Ren's whole body went still. "Hey." The word between them had weight. The kind of weight that only exists when there is history underneath it. Kai glanced at Seo. Seo was watching Ren carefully. He was not panicking, he was just watching. "You look good," Do-hyun said to Ren. "Thanks, you too." A pause. The kind that asked questions without using words. Then Ren looked at Seo and Kai, like he was pulling himself back to the present. "These are my friends, Seo and Kai." Do-hyun smiled politely. But his eyes lingered on Ren. Kai made a decision in about 2 seconds. He put his hand on Seo's shoulder and said, "We were just leaving. Enjoy the festival." He walked Seo away before anyone could protest. They ended up near the garden area, quiet and away from the crowds. "That was awkward," Seo said finally. "Yes." "Did you see the way he looked at Ren?" "Yes." Seo was quiet for a moment. "What do I do now?" Kai looked at the fairy lights strung between the trees. "Nothing," he said. "You don't do anything. You let Ren have that conversation. Whatever they need to say it. And then you see what he chooses." Seo turned to look at him. "You give very good advice for a person who pretends to feel nothing." Kai did not answer that. Above them, the lights flickered softly. Somewhere behind them, the festival continued. And somewhere in a photography booth, Ren Han was probably deciding something. Kai told himself he did not care which way it went. He looked at the ground. He was starting to be a very bad liar, even to himself. Ren found them 20 minutes later. He did not find them by accident. He had clearly looked, which was information Kai filed away in the growing folder in his brain labeled "Things that are going to be a problem." "He's gone," Ren said. He sat down next to Seo on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "We talked. We're fine. We were over a long time ago. I just needed to say that out loud to him." Seo let out a breath so large it was almost comedic. Okay, good. That's good. Were you worried? Ren asked, smiling a little. No, Seo said immediately. Then, a little. Ren looked at him softly. Why? Because you went quiet when you saw him. And you always look like you're carrying something you don't know how to put down. Ren was still for a moment. Then he said, You notice things. Kai taught me to observe carefully. Ren turned to look at Kai. Did he? Kai had not said that in any lesson form. He had simply modeled it by existing. I never said that. You did it without words, Seo said brightly. Kai was going to start eating lunch alone again. He had been too available. This was his punishment. The three of them sat there in the garden for a while. It should have felt peaceful. It mostly did. Except Ren kept glancing at Kai in a way that made the back of Kai's neck warm. Not hostile, not cautious. Curious. The same curiosity from the beginning, except now it had teeth. Later, when Seo ran off to get food because he had eaten one rice cake and was now emotionally running on empty, Ren and Kai were left alone. Ren looked at Kai directly for the first time in a way that felt different. Why did you bring him to me? Ren asked. Kai said nothing. In the library, Ren said. You pointed him toward me. You've been, I don't know the right word, arranging things. I was helping him navigate the school. For 3 weeks? Kai did not answer. Ren leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. I've been thinking about it. You don't do things without reason. You're always 3 steps ahead of everyone. So I've been asking myself, what are you trying to set up? Kai looked at him evenly. Nothing. Kai. There was something about the way Ren said his name, like it was a question and an answer at the same time. Kai looked away. Seo is a good person. You are a good person. I thought you would be good together. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, you were trying to set us up. I was trying to help. Why does it matter to you? You barely knew either of us. Kai pressed his lips together. He did not have an answer that was safe to give. Can I tell you something? Ren asked. If you must. When Seo and I are together, he talks about you, a lot, more than you'd expect. And when I'm around you, I find myself. Ren stopped, then started again. I find myself paying more attention to you than I probably should. The garden was very quiet. Kai's heart was doing something medically concerning. Don't, Kai said. His voice came out flatter than he intended. Seo likes you. Focus on that. Ren looked at him for a long time. What if the person I want to focus on is standing right here? Ren said quietly. Kai stood up. Then you're confused. It's a festival. Fairy lights do things to people. Kai, Seo is coming back. Kai nodded toward the path where Seo was returning with an armful of snacks, looking pleased with himself. Keep your head straight. He walked away before Ren could say another word. His hands were not shaking. That was not a thing that was happening. He was the villain, the matchmaker, the background character in someone else's love story. He needed to remember that. He really, desperately needed to remember that. A week after the festival, something went wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Quietly wrong, like water getting into a wall. You do not see the damage until it is everywhere. Kai had done everything right. He had stepped back. He had stopped joining their lunches. He had been systematically returning to his original position of eating alone and being unapproachable. Seo showed up at his lunch table on Monday anyway. Why are you avoiding us? Seo asked, sitting down and unpacking his food like this was his assigned spot. I'm not avoiding anyone. I'm eating. You haven't come to lunch with us in 5 days. I had things to do. Seo stared at him. Kai, it's lunch. What did you have to do during lunch? Kai opened his mouth, closed it. Eating alone is my preferred state. You preferred to eat with us. I have evidence. Seo held up his phone. There was a photo, from the festival, of all 3 of them laughing. Kai had not known that picture was being taken. He looked, in it, genuinely happy. He looked at the photo for too long. Ren misses you, Seo said quietly. He asks about you. Kai's jaw tightened. You two should be spending time together. We do. But Ren is weird when you're not there. He gets distracted. That's not my problem. Seo put down his chopsticks. His voice went soft and serious in that way it did when he was being real. Can I ask you something and will you be honest? Kai looked at him. Do you have feelings for Ren? The cafeteria was very loud. Plates clattered. People laughed. Kai sat in the middle of all of it and felt very still. No, he said. Seo looked at him for a long time. I'm really bad at reading people, Seo said finally. But I don't think that's true. Kai looked down at his food. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Seo. Kai's voice was careful, deliberate. You like Ren. Ren was starting to like you. I was making that happen. That was the plan. Who made this plan? You? Seo tilted his head. Did anyone ask you to do this? Kai said nothing. Why would you? Seo stopped. His eyes went wide, slow and dawning, like something suddenly made sense. Kai, were you pushing me toward Ren because you thought you didn't deserve to be in the picture? The silence that followed was loud. That's not. Because that's what it looks like, Seo said, not unkindly. You have been doing everything for everyone else this whole time and giving yourself nothing. Kai stared at his food. His throat felt tight. I don't need anything, he said. Everyone needs something, Seo said. Even knives. Kai almost laughed. It came out wrong, something between a laugh and something more painful. Seo reached across the table and put his hand over Kai's for 1 second, warm and brief. Then he pulled back. I'm going to tell you something, Seo said, and I need you to hear it. I don't have feelings for Ren the way you think I do. He's wonderful, and I like him as a person. But what I feel is it's not that kind of thing. I think I knew that for a while, but I didn't want to mess up whatever this was. Kai looked up. Seo met his eyes. Ren is looking for you, and I think you should stop running. Kai sat there for a moment. Then he said, quietly, I don't know how to be the person someone runs toward. Seo smiled. Slow and bright. That's okay. You can learn. We're all learning. Kai found Ren at the library. Of course he did. It was Wednesday. It was always going to be Wednesday in the library. Some things were just geography. Ren was shelving books when Kai walked in. He looked up, and for a second he just looked at Kai, like he was checking that Kai was real. You came, Ren said. Seo told me to. Ren smiled a little. Does Seo run your schedule now? He runs too many things, Kai said. He has too much energy for someone who drops his chopsticks that often. Ren set down his books. He came around the shelf and leaned against it, looking at Kai with that look, the full attention one, the one that made Kai feel seen in a way that was inconvenient and alarming. Can we talk? Ren asked. We're talking. Properly. Without you looking for the nearest exit the whole time. Kai crossed his arms. I don't do that. You looked at the door 4 times during our conversation at the festival. I was checking for Seo. Kai. There it was again, his name in Ren's voice, like something warm pressed to a cold window. Kai uncrossed his arms. He walked to a table and sat down. Ren sat across from him. Between them was a small reading lamp and about 2 weeks of things that had not been said. Ren folded his hands on the table. I know what you were doing, setting me up with Seo. Kai said nothing. I also know it didn't work. Not because Seo isn't wonderful. He is. But because the whole time, every time I was with him, I kept thinking about you. Ren's voice was steady, careful. I kept looking for you, wondering if you'd show up, feeling when you left. Kai looked at the lamp. I don't understand you, Ren said. You're cold on the outside, and then you do something like walk a lost transfer student to the library and push him toward the person you think he should be with. You sit in the wrong seat and don't move until you're ready. You write notes in a notebook and you eat alone on purpose, but you showed up every time either of us needed someone there. He paused. I've been trying to figure you out since day one. Don't, Kai said. His voice was low. I'm not. He stopped. I was supposed to be the background. I don't fit in. I'm not the kind of person who... Who what? Kai looked at him. Who gets chosen? Ren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm choosing you right now. The library was silent around them. Warm and paper-smelling and safe. Kai's chest did the medically concerning thing again. Except this time it did not stop. It kept going, steady and real, like a door opening into a room he had not known was there. This doesn't make sense, Kai said. Most things don't. I tried to set you up with someone else. Yeah, really bad plan. What were you thinking? Despite everything, Kai felt something tug at the corner of his mouth. I thought it would work. It didn't work, because I was too busy noticing you. Kai looked at the table, then at Ren. Ren looked back, honest and open and patient in the way Kai had always found both frustrating and secretly wonderful. I don't know how to do this, Kai said quietly. Whatever this is. Neither do I, Ren said. But I'm willing to figure it out if you are. A pause. Also, Ren added, CO already knows, he said, and I'm quoting, that this was the real plan all along and we just didn't know it yet. He seemed very pleased with himself. Kai stared at him. He planned this? I think we all did. Without knowing. Kai sat with that for a moment. Then he said, he's going to be insufferable about this. Completely, Ren agreed. He'll bring it up constantly. Forever, probably. They looked at each other. Fine, Kai said. The word was small, but it held everything. Ren smiled, full and real, and aimed entirely at Kai. And Kai, for the first time in longer than he could remember, let himself be smiled at. 3 weeks later, Kai was eating lunch at the right table. On purpose this time. Not by accident. Not because Seo had left a sticky note. By choice, which was a new experience and one he was still getting used to. Seo was across from him, telling a story about how he had gotten lost again, new level this time. He had ended up on the roof, and Ren was next to Kai, close enough that their arms touched when Ren reached for his water. Kai had stopped cataloging these moments. At first he had counted them, the number of times Ren chose the seat beside him, the number of texts that came in late at night for no real reason, the number of times Ren said, "Hey, you okay?" So quietly, it was just for Kai. He had stopped counting because the numbers were too big and too good, and he had not known what to do with that. And then the janitor found me, Seo finished, and honestly I think he expects it now. He gave me a map. He had one ready. He made a map specifically for you? Kai asked. It has my name on it, in permanent marker. Ren started laughing and did not stop for a while. Kai looked at them both, Seo, waving his chopsticks for emphasis, Ren, laughing with his whole face, and felt something settle in his chest. Not dramatic, not a revelation, just settled, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Which was a strange thing to feel when you had started out as the villain of the story. Later, when Seo had run off to return library books before the deadline, and Kai and Ren were left with the remains of lunch, Ren said quietly, "You're smiling." "No, I'm not." "A little. That's my resting face." Ren looked at him with visible disbelief. "Kai, your resting face has never looked like that." Kai picked up his chopsticks. "You don't know what my resting face looks like. I've been studying it for weeks. I know every version." This was either very romantic or very alarming, possibly both. Kai chose to look at his lunch. Ren bumped his shoulder lightly. "It looks good on you." The smiling. Kai said nothing, but he did not try to stop the expression either. That afternoon, they walked out of school together. Seo was somewhere ahead of them, enthusiastically greeting a group of people he had clearly met yesterday for the first time, but now considered his closest friends, because Seo collected people the way other people collected receipts, without meaning to, and always too many. Ren walked next to Kai, close but easy, hands in pockets. "Can I ask you something?" Kai said. "Always." Kai looked forward, at the path ahead. "When did you know, about me, that it was me you wanted?" Ren thought about it. "The cafeteria," he said, "the first week, when I saw you alone at the table and thought, he's choosing to be alone right now, but that's not the same as wanting to be. And then Seo showed up with the sticky note, and you sat down, and you said maybe 3 words the whole lunch, but you stayed. I thought, there's someone here who doesn't know how to ask for things. I wanted to be someone you'd ask." Kai stared at the path. "That was early," he said. "Very early," Ren agreed. "It was inconvenient. You were trying to set me up with someone else." "I was trying to help." "You were terrible at hiding it though. The way you looked at things, you were always tracking, always careful. But there were cracks, moments where you'd forget to be blank." Ren glanced at him. "I liked those moments." Kai looked at him. Ren looked back. The afternoon light was warm and the street was quiet, and somewhere ahead of them, Seo was dramatically greeting his fourth new friend of the day. "For what it's worth," Kai said slowly, "you were also easy to watch. Annoyingly." Ren grinned. "Annoyingly? You make everyone feel important. It's distracting." "I'll try to be less distracting." "Don't," Kai said, before he could stop himself. Ren's grin went softer. He looked at Kai like the word was the best thing he had heard all week, maybe longer. "Okay," Ren said. "I won't." They walked on. Up ahead, Seo turned back and spotted them. His face broke into the most enormous smile that human muscles could physically produce. "There they are," he called out. "My greatest achievement." "We are not your achievement," Kai said. "I kept the faith. I held the space. I believed in this. You dropped your chopsticks for 3 weeks and talked about colors. And it worked." Kai looked at Ren. Ren was already looking at him. "He's going to put this in his personal statement," Kai said. "Absolutely," Ren said. "He'll tell this story to everyone he knows." "He already has. He texted me at midnight with a summary." Kai closed his eyes, briefly opened them. Why are we friends with him? Ren thought about it with great seriousness. Because he kept a seat for you with a sticky note, and that's how this started. Kai thought about it. "Fine," he said. "He can have the credit." Ren smiled. And Kai, the boy who was written to ruin things, the villain who had forgotten to leave, the matchmaker who had accidentally matched himself, smiled back. Not small this time. Real and whole and his. The first thing I noticed was that my hands were too pretty. Not in a normal way. Like, aggressively, unfairly, suspiciously pretty. Long fingers, smooth skin nails, that looked like someone had paid money for them. I sat up slowly, looked around the room, and realized 3 things very fast. 1. This room was enormous, and way too fancy for someone like me. 2. The mirror across the room was showing me a face that was definitely not mine. 3. There was a sword on the wall, an actual sword, just hanging there like interior decoration. I got up carefully, walked to the mirror, and stared. The face looking back at me was beautiful in that sharp, cold way that villains in stories always are. High cheekbones, dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it had never smiled warmly at anyone in its life. I had read enough stories to know what this kind of face meant. This was a villain face. My name, as far as the memories flooding into my head could tell me, was Cassian Vore, second son of the powerful Vore family, twin brother of Dorian Vore, who was the actual villain of the novel I had apparently fallen into. A novel called The Emperor's Sword, which I had read twice and rated 4 out of 5 stars because the ending made me cry in a coffee shop. I knew this story. I knew exactly what happened to Cassian Vore. He was used by his twin brother as a decoy. He took the blame for things Dorian did, and in chapter 14 he was executed publicly, while Dorian watched from a balcony and did not even look sad about it. I sat back down on the very expensive bed and put my face in my hands. "Okay," I said to no one. "Okay, this is fine. This is completely fine." It was not fine. I had about 3 months before chapter 14. 3 months to figure out how to not get executed for crimes I did not commit, while also not attracting attention from anyone important in this story. The plan was simple. Stay quiet. Stay in my room. Let Dorian do his villain things without me anywhere nearby. Do not, under any circumstances, get involved with the male lead. The male lead of The Emperor's Sword was a man named Ezrin Holt, captain of the Imperial Guard. Tall, serious, loyal to a fault, and completely devoted to justice. In the novel, he was the one who eventually caught Dorian and stopped him. He was good and noble, and honestly a little boring, which is why I had given the novel 4 stars instead of 5. In the novel, Cassian and Ezrin had exactly 2 interactions. One where Ezrin arrested Cassian by mistake, and one where Ezrin realized the mistake, but it was too late, because Cassian was already sentenced. I was not going to let that happen. I had a plan. The plan lasted about 4 hours. I had decided to sneak out of the Vora estate to get a better sense of the city layout, because in the novel the city had 3 exits and I needed to know which one was least guarded. I wore a plain cloak over the fancy clothes, pulled the hood up, and felt very clever about the whole thing. Then I turned a corner near the market and walked directly into a fight. Not a small argument, an actual physical fight. 3 men in dark coats had someone pressed against the wall of an alley, and the someone was clearly losing. I should have walked away. Any smart person would have walked away, but the someone made a sound that was very obviously pain, and my legs made a decision my brain had not agreed to yet. I stepped in. I had never fought anyone in my actual life, but Kazian's body apparently had training, because my hands moved before I thought about it. I hit the first man hard enough to make him stumble. The second one turned on me, and I ducked without knowing I was going to. The third one ran. The first 2 looked at each other, looked at me, and ran after the third. I stood there breathing hard and looked at the person I had just rescued. He was tall, dark hair, the kind of face that looked serious even when it was surprised. He wore a captain's insignia on his coat. My brain went completely blank. Ezrin Holt looked at me for a long moment. "You just fought 3 armed men," he said. "I have no idea why," I said honestly. He almost smiled. Almost. "Are you hurt?" I looked at my hands. One of my knuckles was bleeding. A little. He reached into his coat, took out a cloth, and handed it to me. "You're Kazian Vore," he said. It was not a question. "Unfortunately," I said. He looked at me like that was a strange answer. It was a strange answer. But he did not walk away. He stood there while I wrapped my hand, and then he said, "I'll walk you back to the estate." This was already going wrong. 3 days after the alley incident, I had almost convinced myself it was not a big deal. Almost. The problem was that Ezrin Holt had walked me back to the estate, stood at the gate until I was safely inside, and then said, "Be careful," in a voice that sounded like he meant it. And that was somehow worse than anything else that had happened. In the novel, Ezrin never said anything kind to Kazian. He barely looked at him. But here he was, being careful, and handing me cloth for my bleeding hand, and existing in ways the story had not prepared me for. I sat in the library, because Cassian apparently spent a lot of time there, and I was trying to be consistent, and opened a book I was not reading, and thought about what this meant. The answer I kept arriving at was, nothing good. If Ezrin started paying attention to me, that was a problem. The entire point of my survival plan was to be invisible, to be the Vore twin no one noticed. If the male lead of this story started treating me like a person instead of background furniture, things were going to get complicated very fast. "You look very unhappy for someone sitting in a comfortable chair," said a voice. I looked up. A boy about my age was standing in the doorway of the library, looking at me with open curiosity. He had a friendly face, and the kind of smile that made you want to trust him immediately. In the novel, I recognized him after a moment. This was Pel Oren, Ezrin's junior officer and the main source of comic relief in chapters 6 through 9. "I am not unhappy," I said. "I am thinking." "Those look the same on you," he said, walking in like I had invited him. "Also, I came to tell you that Captain Holt wants to know if you would be willing to make a statement about the incident in the market." "What incident?" I said, which was a stupid thing to say because there was only one incident. Pel gave me a look. "The 3 armed men you punched, one of them turns out to be connected to a smuggling ring the captain has been investigating. Your description of them would help." He paused. He could have sent a letter, but he asked me to come personally, which is, between you and me, very unusual behavior for him. I stared at the book I was not reading. "Tell him I will send a written account," I said. "He said you might say that," Pel said. "He also said to tell you that a written account is fine, but he would prefer to speak with you directly if possible." "Why?" I said. Pel shrugged in a way that suggested he had theories he was choosing not to share. "He is the captain. He does not always explain himself." He tilted his head. "You know, you are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Honestly, someone more like your brother." He said it lightly, but his eyes were watching me carefully. I was quiet for a moment. In the novel, Pel was good at reading people. That was actually why he was useful to Ezrin. I had to be careful. "I am nothing like my brother," I said. That was true. Cassian Vore, the character, had been crushed and used by Dorian for years. I had no intention of being either of those things. Pell smiled. A real one this time. Good, he said simply, and left. The next morning I wrote a very detailed account of the three men and sent it to the captain's office. I described their clothing, their height, the direction they ran. I was thorough, professional. I signed it Cassian Vore, second son of Vore, which felt extremely awkward but was technically accurate. I thought that would be the end of it. Ezran showed up at the estate that evening. My brother Dorian was out, which was lucky, because Dorian's relationship with Ezran in the novel was hostile from the start, and I did not want to be in the room when those two were in the same space. I met Ezran in the front sitting room, which was decorated with uncomfortable-looking furniture that was clearly meant to impress rather than to be sat in. Ezran sat in the uncomfortable chair like it was perfectly normal. I sat across from him and tried not to look like I was panicking. "Your account was thorough," he said. "I tried to be helpful," I said. "The detail about the emblem on the third man's collar was particularly useful." He paused. "Most people would not notice that in the middle of a fight." "I notice things," I said carefully. He looked at me in that direct way he had, not aggressive, just very present, like he was actually paying attention. "You also stepped in to help someone you did not know, against three men who were armed. That is not a small thing to do." I looked at my hands. The knuckle had healed fast, which I suspected was one of the benefits of being in a fictional body with apparently good healing. "It seemed wrong not to," I said. Silence. Then, "Yes," he said quietly, like that was an answer he had not expected but found satisfying. He asked a few more questions about the incident. I answered them honestly. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door, and we stood in the entrance hall for a moment in a silence that was not uncomfortable, which was somehow the most alarming thing that had happened so far. "You should not wander the market district alone," he said at the door, "particularly in the evenings." "Are you telling me to be careful again?" I said before I could stop myself. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Yes," he said. "I suppose I am." He left. I closed the door. I stood there for a full minute. This was bad. This was very, very bad. I was starting to like him, and we were only in part 2. I had been avoiding Dorian since I arrived in this story. This was not difficult, because Dorian was the kind of person who filled a room with his own sense of importance, and then left before anyone else could say anything. He was rarely home, and when he was, I hid in the library and read actual books instead of staring at them. But on the morning of my 14th day in this world, Dorian walked into my room without knocking. I knew it was him before I turned around. Same face as mine, technically, but worn differently. Where my expression apparently defaulted to quiet and a little sad, his was permanently set to a look that said he was calculating something. "Brother," he said pleasantly, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I said. "We do." He sat down in the chair by the window without being invited. In the novel, Dorian was charming in a surface way, the kind of charming that made you want to agree with him before you figured out you should not. "I heard you had a conversation with Ezran Holt." I kept my face still. He had questions about an incident I witnessed. "You witnessed," Dorian repeated, like he found the word funny. "I also heard you stepped into that incident, which is not like you, Cassian." That was the problem. It was not like Cassian. The real Cassian, the one from the novel, had spent years learning to disappear. He did not step into fights. He did not help strangers. He did not talk to the captain of the Imperial Guard. "I was passing by," I said. "It would have been strange to keep walking." Dorian looked at me for a moment. Then he smiled. "Of course," he said warmly. "I am glad you are becoming more engaged with the city. Actually, that is what I wanted to discuss. I have a task for you." And there it was. In the novel, this was the part where Dorian started using Cassian as a tool. He was going to ask me to deliver something, or meet someone, or be seen somewhere. Whatever it was, it would be designed to put Cassian in a position that could later be used as evidence against him. "What kind of task?" I said. "Simple." He reached into his coat and placed a sealed letter on the table near me. "Deliver this to a merchant named Aldous near the East Gate. That is all. No need to open it or ask questions. Just deliver and come home." I looked at the letter. In the novel, One of the things that got Kasian convicted was being seen meeting with people connected to Dorian's criminal network. He never knew what he was carrying. He was never told who these people were. "I am busy this week," I said. Dorian blinked. That was not the answer he had prepared for. "It will only take an hour." I said, "I am busy." Silence. Dorian looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. He was recalculating. I could see it happening. "Kasian," he said, softer now. "We are family. I am asking for one small thing. And I am saying no." I looked at him directly. "If you need a delivery maid, hire someone." Another silence. Longer this time. Then Dorian picked up the letter, put it back in his coat, and stood up. "Of course," he said pleasantly. "I understand. You are busy." He left. I sat very still and breathed. That was the first time anyone in this story had said no to Dorian Vori. I could tell by the way his face had gone very calm and very blank, which in people like him usually means they are genuinely angry but choosing not to show it. I had just made myself a target. The thought was not great, but the alternative was worse. I went to the library and stared at a book for a while. Then Pell showed up again, which I was beginning to suspect was just going to be his thing. "You look even more unhappy than last time," he said cheerfully. "Thank you, Pell," I said. "That is very helpful." He sat across from me and dropped a small wrapped package on the table. "From the captain. He said you mentioned your knuckle was slow to heal, so he sent something from the infirmary." I stared at the package. I said it was fine. He heard fine and decided to send medicine anyway. Pell propped his chin on his hand. He is like that. He notices things people say are fine and then quietly does something about them. It is very annoying, honestly. I once told him I was fine after a 12-hour patrol and woke up the next morning to find he had rescheduled my next shift. He paused. I did not complain. I picked up the package and held it. It was a small thing, just ointment from an infirmary, but it was such a specific kind of thoughtful that I had to work very hard to keep my expression neutral. "He really needs to stop doing that," I said. "Completely agree," Pell said, in a tone that suggested he agreed with the opposite. "Oh, also, the captain was wondering if you might be interested in having dinner sometime this week," he said, and I am quoting him, that he would like to continue the conversation. "What conversation?" I said. He did not specify. Pell smiled. He rarely specifies. That is another annoying thing about him. I thought about Dorian's expression when I said no. I thought about the letter I had not delivered. I thought about chapter 14 and an execution I was trying very hard to avoid. And then, because I clearly had no survival instinct at all, I said, "Tell him Thursday works." Pell looked genuinely delighted. "Excellent," he said, and stood up. "I will tell him. Try not to look so terrified about it." "I am not terrified," I said. "You are a little terrified," he said kindly, and left. He was right. I was a little terrified. But it was the kind of terrified that also felt, underneath, very much like something else. I was not going to name that something else. Not yet. Let me be clear about something. I had read the novel. I knew exactly who Ezrin Holt was as a character. Serious, rule-following, devoted to the Empire with the kind of loyalty that sometimes crosses into stubbornness. In the novel he had about 40 pages of actual personality, and the rest of the time he was just being competent at things, which is admirable but not especially interesting. But the man sitting across from me at a very quiet table in a very good restaurant was considerably more complicated than 40 pages of competence. "You have not touched your food," he said. "I am thinking," I said. "You do that a lot." He said it without judgment, just as an observation. "Is that a problem?" "No." He picked up his own fork. "I find it interesting." I looked at him. "Most people find it off-putting. Most people are not very patient," he said simply. I did not have an answer for that, so I ate some of my dinner and tried to organize my thoughts. The thing about Ezrin that the novel had not prepared me for was that he asked questions and then actually listened to the answers. Not in a polite, half-listening way. In a way that made you feel like what you said was going somewhere and being kept. He had asked me, somewhere between the soup and the main course, what I thought of the city. Not a polite question. He had asked specifically what I noticed about it and why. And I had answered honestly, because Cassian's memories gave me context I could not have faked, and because Ezrin's expression when I started talking made it very hard to stop. The East District has been changing, I said. More private guards in the last 2 months. Less city patrol presence. Whatever is happening near the East Gate is being managed privately rather than officially, and that means someone with enough money to replace city services decided they wanted less oversight. Ezrin went very still. What? I said. That is, he said carefully, a very accurate observation. Is it connected to the men from the alley? Silence. He looked at me in a way that was evaluating and something else that I could not quite name. You should not ask questions like that, he said, not harshly, like he was saying it for my protection. I know, I said, but I notice things and sometimes they add up. He set down his fork. Cajun, he said, and the way he said my name did something embarrassing to my chest. There are people in this city who would be unhappy to hear you speaking like this. I know that too. Then why are you saying it to me? Good question. The honest answer was that I trusted him in the way you trust a character who you have watched being good for an entire novel even when it cost him something. But I could not say that, so I said the second truest thing. Because you are the only person I have met who listens like the answer matters. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right. Your brother sent you somewhere last week and you refused to go. He said it calmly. How do you know about that? I should have been surprised. I was not. You have someone watching the estate. I have someone watching your brother, he said. There was something in that distinction that he meant me to hear. Not your brother and you, just your brother. Casian, I need to know if you are involved in what Dorian is doing. And there it was. The question the story was built on. I looked at him across the table in a restaurant that had suddenly become very quiet in the way things go quiet when something important is happening. I thought about chapter 14. I thought about the letter I had not delivered. I thought about the way Ezrin had handed me a cloth for my bleeding hand, like it was the most natural thing. No, I said. I am not involved. I have been trying very hard not to be. He looked at me for a long time. I believe you, he said. Just like that? Just like that. He picked up his fork again. Finish your dinner. You have barely eaten. I looked at my plate, then at him. You are very strange for someone who is supposed to be strictly professional, I said. He almost smiled again. That almost smile was going to destroy me. So I have been told. We finished dinner. He walked me back toward the estate district, even though it was out of his way. And when we stopped at the corner where our paths split, he said, Be careful of your brother, and if anything happens, send for Pell. He will find me. Why would you do that? I asked. Help me, I mean. He looked at me with that direct gaze. Because it is the right thing to do, he said, and then, quieter, and because I think you have been carrying too much alone for a long time. He walked away. I stood on the corner for a full 2 minutes. This man was going to be a serious problem. 3 weeks after the dinner I had decided was a one-time thing, Ezrin had eaten with me 4 more times. To be fair, 2 of those were accidental. One happened because we both ended up at the same tea house, and it would have been rude to leave. One happened because Pell engineered it very obviously, and then pretended he had not. I said nothing about that because Pell had also started bringing me information about the Eastgate situation in a way that was very casual and very clearly deliberate. I liked Pell. He was chaotic in a friendly way, like a helpful disaster. But the situation with Dorian was getting worse. He had tried twice more to get me to do things I was not going to do. Both times I refused. Both times he smiled pleasantly and left. That pleasant smile was more frightening than anger would have been. It meant he was adjusting his plan, and I did not know what the new plan looked like. The morning of day 31, I went to the library and found a note tucked into my usual book. No signature, just a date, a location, and the words, "Be there, or people you have spoken with recently will be implicated instead." I sat with the note for a long time. This was the divergence point. In the novel, this was where Cassian, faced with a threat to someone else, agreed to do what Dorian wanted. He went to the meeting. He was seen there. Everything after that moved fast toward chapter 14. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I went to find Pell. He was in the training yard near the guard quarter, which was not where I would usually go, but I had learned that Pell was usually findable within 3 locations, and the training yard was one of them. He saw me coming, and his expression shifted immediately from relaxed to alert. "What happened?" he said. I handed him the note. He read it. His face did something complicated. "When and where is this?" "Tomorrow evening. An address near the East Gate. That is inside the area we have been watching." He looked up. "Does he know what you have told the captain?" "I do not think so, but he suspects something changed." I looked at my hands. "If I do not go," he said, "people I have spoken with will be implicated." "I think he means Ezrin." Pell was quiet. Then, "I am going to take this to the captain now." "I know," I said. "That is why I brought it to you." Pell folded the note and tucked it away. He looked at me with an expression that was more serious than I had ever seen on his face. "You did the right thing," he said. "Whatever happens next, you did the right thing." I nodded. I felt very tired. The next part happened fast, the way bad things tend to. Ezrin came to see me that evening, not for dinner. He came to the estate directly, which had never happened before, and we sat in the uncomfortable front room, and he looked at me in a way that was different from before, more careful, more aware of something. "I read the note," he said. "I know, Cajun." He leaned forward slightly, and the shift was small but noticeable. "I need you to tell me everything you know about what your brother is doing. Not the things you have mentioned carefully. Everything." I looked at him. "If I do that, my brother will know I talked. He will make sure I am blamed for everything he has done. I will not let that happen." "You cannot promise that," I said. "You follow the law. If the evidence points to me, you will follow where it points." He was quiet. "Then, no," he said firmly. "I follow justice. Those are not always the same thing." He met my eyes. "I have been watching this case for 4 months. I know your brother's network. I know what he has built. I have also been watching you for 3 weeks, and I know the difference between you and him." Something in my chest was doing something I was going to firmly ignore. "And if you are wrong about me, I am not wrong about you," he said, simply, like it was a fact he had already verified. I told him everything. It took 2 hours. I told him every piece Cajun's memories held, everything I had noticed myself, everything Pell had quietly given me. I told him about the letter I had not delivered, and the note in my book, and the pleasant smile that scared me more than yelling would. Ezrin listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back and was quiet for a moment. "You have been building a case," he said. "I have been trying to survive," I said. "Both things can be true." He stood up. "I am going to that location tomorrow evening." "Not you. You are going to stay home and stay visible. Is that clear?" "You cannot order me around," I said. "I am asking," he said, which was somehow more effective than ordering. "Please." One word, and I completely caved. "Fine," I said. "I will stay home." He nodded. He moved toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back, and for a moment he looked like he was going to say something that was not professional or official. He said, "Thank you for trusting me." I had no idea what to do with that, so I said, "Do not get hurt tomorrow." He looked at me for a moment. "I will try," he said, and left. I sat in the uncomfortable chair for a long time after he was gone. Everything was about to change. I could feel it. I stayed home. I want to be clear about that. I stayed home exactly as requested. I was visible. I had dinner in the main hall. I read in the library. I was, by any measure, a person who was not doing anything suspicious. Then at 9 in the evening, a servant came to the library and said there had been an incident near the East Gate and Captain Holt had been injured. I was out the door before the sentence was finished. I know. I said I would stay home. But staying home when Ezrin was hurt was physically impossible, and I was not going to apologize for that. Pell met me outside. He had been running, which was not a good sign. "He is okay," he said immediately, because he clearly knew what I was going to ask. "He is okay. It is not serious." "What happened?" "The meeting was a trap. Not for us. For your brother." Pell fell into step beside me as we moved toward the guardhouse. Someone else was at that location who was not supposed to be there. There was a confrontation. The captain got between them, and one of them had a knife. He got hit in the shoulder. I made a sound that I hoped did not reveal too much. "He is asking for you," Pell said. in a very neutral voice that was not neutral at all. "He is asking for me," I repeated. "Specifically," he said, and again I am quoting, "Tell Kasian first." Pell was looking straight ahead, but I could see the edge of a smile. I thought that was worth noting. I did not say anything. I walked faster. Ezran was in a room at the guardhouse, sitting on a cot with his coat off and his shoulder bandaged. He looked pale in the way people look when they have lost more blood than is comfortable, but not enough to be truly frightening. When I came through the door, he looked up and something in his face settled. "You came," he said. "Of course I came," I said, and I sat down on the stool near the cot and looked at his shoulder with the kind of focus I needed to stay calm. Pell said it was not serious. "It is not," he said. "I have had worse." "That is not comforting information." "No," he admitted. "I suppose not." I looked at him properly. He looked tired. Not just physically tired, but the kind of tired that comes from carrying something for a long time. "Did you catch my brother?" I asked. "Not tonight." He shifted carefully. He was not at the location. Someone else was there instead. Someone who works for him. They were meeting with a third party we did not know about. He paused. "It is more complicated than we thought." "It is always more complicated than anyone thinks," I said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes." He looked at me. "Are you all right? You are the one who was stabbed." "I know," he said. "I am asking about you anyway." I pressed my hands together in my lap and looked at them. "I am fine," I said, which was Kasian's version of, "I am managing, but I do not know for how much longer." "Kasian." His voice was quiet. "Look at me." I looked at him. "You have been handling this alone for a long time," he said. "Before you came to Pell. Before any of this. You figured out what your brother was doing and you said nothing and carried it alone. Why?" I was quiet for a moment. The honest answer was complicated. The short answer was, because I did not think anyone would believe me over Dorian. Something shifted in his expression. It was not pity. It was something more complicated and more serious. "I believe you," he said. "I believed you before you showed me anything. I want you to understand that." I had been holding things tightly inside my chest for 31 days, and that sentence was a very inconvenient time for them to try to get out. I focused very hard on staying calm. "Why?" I said, which came out quieter than I meant. He reached out slowly and put his hand over mine on my knee, just held it there. "Because you show up," he said. "When it would be easier to look away, you do not. That tells me more than any report." I stared at his hand over mine. It was warm. I had not expected that. "You are very different from how I expected," I said without thinking. "How did you expect me?" "More," I stopped. "More strictly official. More by the rules." "I follow rules when they serve people," he said. "When they do not, I follow the people." A pause. "You are a person I want to follow, if that is not too strange a thing to say." It was an extremely strange thing to say, and also one of the most beautiful things anyone had ever said to me, and I was going to need a moment. "It is a little strange," I said. "I will accept that." He did not move his hand. We sat there for a while in the quiet guardhouse room. Outside, I could hear Pell pretending very loudly to be busy with paperwork. Pell was not subtle. He was lovable, but not subtle. "Get some rest," I finally said. "You should too," he said. He let go of my hand slowly. "Kasian, whatever happens with Dorian, you will not be alone in it." I stood up. I needed to stand up before I did something I could not take back. "Okay," I said. It was a small word, but I meant all of it. I left. Pell was waiting in the hallway, very innocently reviewing documents. "Not a word," I said. "I said nothing," he said cheerfully. "You are thinking very loudly," I said. He grinned. "I am just happy for my captain," he said. "He has been professionally excellent for years. It is nice to see him be a person for a change." I walked past him before my face could do anything I did not want it to do. Outside, the air was cool, and I stood in it for a while. My hand was still warm where his had been. Chapter 14 felt very far away tonight. I was going to fight very hard to keep it that way. I had 1 week before the convergence point. In the novel, Chapter 14 happened at the end of month 3. I was now at month 3, week 3. I had changed enough things that the novel's exact timeline was probably different, but some things in stories have a shape that pulls events toward them no matter how much you push back. A story wants to finish itself, and this story had always been about a Vori twin taking the fall. I just needed to make sure it was the right one. The problem was Dorian knew something had shifted. I saw it in small ways. The servants reported to him more carefully when I was around. He started appearing in rooms I was using, not confrontationally, just present, watching. When he spoke to me, he was pleasant in that calculated way, but his eyes were doing something different than his mouth. On the morning of day 78, he came to breakfast. We never had breakfast together. This was new. I have been thinking, he said, pouring tea like we did this every day, about how little time we have spent together recently. We are brothers, Cassian. We should be closer. We have never been close, I said. He set down the teapot. No, he agreed, but that could change. He looked at me with something that almost looked sincere. Almost. I know I have not been good to you. I looked at him. I used you, he said, when we were younger. I used the fact that you were quiet and people overlooked you. I put things on you that were not yours to carry. He paused. I want to be better than that. In the novel, this was not in the story. Dorian never admitted anything. He never attempted this kind of conversation, which meant this was not Dorian being honest. This was Dorian having figured out that his other tools were not working and reaching for a different one. What do you want? I said. He looked surprised, just for a moment, that I had gone straight to it. Then he smiled, a real one this time, the kind that meant I had done something he found interesting. I want your help, he said, genuinely, not to carry things blindly, as a partner. In what? In what I have been building. He leaned forward. It is not what you think. The men near the East Gate, the network, it is not crime, Cassian. It is survival. The people in power in this empire are not kind to families like ours. I have been building something that ensures we are not subject to them. I listened to the whole speech. It was very good. In another version of me, in another version of this story, it might have worked. The part about families like ours, about survival, about power, those were real things, real problems, real fears. He was wrapping something real around something false, and it was skillfully done. And the people who have been hurt by what you have built? I asked. He paused. Just briefly. There is always cost. The man from the alley, I said. He was one of yours. He was shaking down a market seller who could not pay. That is not survival. That is what you are doing to survive being done to someone else. Silence. You have changed, Dorian said. Not pleasantly, just factually. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I was always like this and you never looked close enough to see it. He sat back. The pleasant expression was gone. I am going to ask you one more time, he said quietly. Stand with me or stand against me. There is no middle. Then I stand against you, I said, because the middle was never real. He stood up. For a moment, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, something sadder than anger. I did not want it to be like this, he said. I know, I said. I believe you. I still think you are wrong. He left. I sat at the breakfast table and breathed. Then I sent Pell a message. The meeting that afternoon with Ezran and Pell was fast and serious. I told them what Dorian had said. Ezran listened with his hands folded on the desk, expression very still. He is going to move soon, Ezran said. He knows we are watching him. He was testing you to see if you could be turned. He will not be patient anymore, I agreed. He will want to act before you have enough to hold him, which means he will try to use you, Pell said, even without your agreement. He will create evidence. I know. I looked at Ezran. There is something I did not tell you before. I was afraid of how it would look. I paused. There is a letter. Dorian left a copy of something in my room 3 weeks ago. I do not know if it was deliberate or a mistake, but it connects me to one of his early operations. It was before I arrived, before I refused him, but on paper it will not look like that. Ezran looked at me carefully. You have been holding this for 3 weeks. I did not know if telling you would make things worse. Show me, he said. I showed him. Pell took the letter and examined it. Ezran read it twice. Then he sat back, and looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. "Thank you for showing me this now," he said. "You are not going to ask why I waited?" "No," he said, "because I understand why you waited. You were not sure how much to trust me." A pause. "Do you trust me now?" "Yes," I said, simply, because it was true. He nodded. Something in his eyes was warm in a way his expression did not fully show. "Then let me handle this. All of it. You have been carrying this for too long." "Ezrin," I said, and the name came out softer than I intended. "Be careful. Dorian knows you are close. He is not going to come at you through the front." He looked at me. "I know." "I am serious," I said. "He is going to do something that looks like it is about the case but is actually about you." A pause. "You are worried about me," he said, not like a question. "Obviously," I said, which came out with more feeling than I was prepared for. Pell made a small sound. I looked at him. He was examining the ceiling with great interest. "Pell," I said. "Yes," he said serenely. "I need you to look literally anywhere except at me right now." "I am looking at the ceiling," he said. Ezrin was not looking at the ceiling. He was looking at me with that expression that was almost a smile, and also something deeper that I had no word for yet. "I will be careful," he said quietly. I was going to need chapter 14 to be over soon, because I was running out of ways to keep my feelings from becoming very obvious. The night Dorian made his move, I was ready. I will not pretend I knew exactly how it would happen, but I had spent enough time in this story to feel its shape, and the shape was pulling everything toward this night with the kind of momentum that you either run from or turn around and face. I chose to face it. Dorian's plan was elegant in a terrible way. He had arranged for documents to be found in my room, documents that connected me to his network in a way that was detailed and looked very real. He had also arranged for a witness, someone who would testify to seeing me at a meeting I had never attended, and he had timed all of it for the morning after a public event where he would be visibly in another part of the city. He had not counted on two things. The first was that Pell had been quiet and careful and very good at his job for 3 months, and Pell had found the witness 2 days before and learned, through means I did not ask about in detail, that the witness had been paid. The second was that Ezrin had spent the last 3 weeks building a case that was not about me at all. It was entirely about Dorian, and it was done. The arrest happened in the early morning. I was not there because Ezrin had firmly and clearly told me not to be there, and I had agreed because I was genuinely trying to stop making solo decisions that gave people heart attacks. Pell described it to me afterward. Dorian had been calm, apparently, polite even. He had asked which of the charges were being laid. He had listened to the list. Then he had looked at the arresting officers and said, "Where is my brother?" "Not here," Pell had told him, and Dorian had gone quiet. I heard this and felt something complicated. Not satisfaction, not relief exactly. Something more like grief at the edge of relief. Dorian was terrible. He had done genuinely harmful things to real people. He had spent years treating me as a tool. But he was also, in his way, someone who had been afraid and had chosen a very bad way of dealing with it. I did not forgive him, but I understood something about him that I had not expected to understand. I told Ezrin this, later, sitting across from him in the tea house that had become something close to our place. He listened to all of it without interrupting. "Does it make it harder?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It does not make him right, but it makes it harder." "That is how it should be," he said. "It is easy to dismiss people who hurt you if they are purely evil. It is harder when they are also real." I looked at my tea. "You are surprisingly wise for someone who spent most of this story giving me concerned looks and showing up when I did not ask you to. You never asked, but you always needed it," he said, not unkindly. "You do not know that. I know that you helped a stranger in an alley when it was easier not to. I know you refused your brother 3 times when it would have been safer to comply. I know you brought me information that could have been used against you because you thought it was the right thing to do." He paused. "I know that every time I have shown up when you did not ask, you looked less alone afterward." I stared at my tea very hard. "Kasian," he said. "I am listening," I said, to the tea. "Look at me." I looked up. He was close. We were at a small table, and he was leaning forward slightly, and his eyes were very direct and warm in the way they always were, but now with something else underneath. Something that had been building since an alley, and a cloth for a bleeding hand, and 4 months of meals, and conversations, and Pell making moderately obvious interventions. "I would like to say something," he said, "and I would like you to let me finish before you find a way to redirect the conversation." "I do not redirect conversations," I said. "You absolutely redirect conversations," he said. "You are very good at it, I have noticed." I closed my mouth. "I have been watching you for 4 months," he said. "At first because it was my job, then because I wanted to, then because I could not imagine not doing it." He looked at me steadily. "You are the most careful, most stubborn, most quietly brave person I have ever met. You came into a situation that was designed to destroy you, and you refused to be destroyed. I do not know how to not be in your life now. I have tried to think about it, and I cannot find a version of my days that makes sense without you in them." The tea house was very quiet. "That is," I said, and then stopped. "Too much?" he asked. There was something behind his steady expression that was, I realized, a little nervous. Ezrin Holt, steady and serious and competent, was a little nervous. That made me feel something so warm I almost could not hold it. "No," I said. "It is not too much. It is—" I stopped again. "I woke up in a story that was supposed to end badly for me, and then you kept showing up. You were not supposed to save me. The story was not written that way. You were supposed to be on the other side of this. And yet," he said. "And yet," I agreed. "You kept saving the wrong brother." Something crossed his face. Then he laughed. A real one. Not the almost smile. An actual laugh, low and warm. And it changed his entire face into something that was not serious at all, just human and real and impossibly good to look at. "I saved exactly the right brother," he said. "I thought about chapter 14. About an execution that had not happened. About a story I had walked into knowing how it ended, and somehow written a different ending into it." "Pell is going to be so smug about this," I said. "Pell has been smug about this since week 2, Ezrin said. "He told me, and I am quoting him, that I had the face of someone who had already made up his mind, and was just waiting for paperwork." I laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised me. That sounds exactly like him. He was not wrong, Ezrin said. He reached across the small table and put his hand over mine the same way he had in the guardhouse room, but not the same way at all. More certain this time. More like something decided. "Is this all right?" I turned my hand over under his so our palms were together. "Yes," I said. He looked at me like he had found something he had been looking for without knowing he was looking. "Good," he said. Outside the tea house, the city was loud and alive and going about its business with no idea that a story had just finished and started in the same moment. Somewhere across the city, Dorian Vore was in a room where the consequences of his choices were catching up to him. Somewhere nearby, Pell was probably already composing a very smug speech for later. And I was sitting in a tea house holding the hand of a man who had saved me when the story said he should not, and feeling, for the first time since I had woken up in a body that was not mine, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I had come into this story as the one who was meant to fall. I was leaving it, instead, as someone who had been found.